on, and you'll see that we're video recording it, so it'll be posted to the web, and it'll be closed captioned so that when it does go on the web. Let's go ahead and get started. And what I want to do maybe first is to do the introductions. So if we can start, how about with Dustin Hanvey?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dustin Hanvey. I am an English professor here at PCC and the Vice President of the Academic Senate.
I'm Danny Hammond, and I'm the Faculty Association rep, or faculty rep here in the committee.
And good afternoon, I'm Bob Bell. I'm the Vice President of Student Learning Services and the Interim Vice President of Instruction.
Hi, I'm Anthony Brown, Fiscal Services, Budget Desk.
Maria Descalzo, Resource Representative, Fiscal Services.
Without a microphone is Dwayne Cable, Vice President of Information Technology, and Gail Cooper, General Counsel.
Keith Oberlander, Faculty Math.
Rick Van Pelt, Vice President of Admin.
Cynthia Smith, Committee Coordinator.
Alexander Soto, Student Trustee.
Daniela Reda, Vice President for Business Affairs with Associated Students.
Bob Miller, Vice President, Educational Services.
Kent Yamauchi, Office of Special Services and Representative Management Association.
John Woods, Kinesiology, Health and Athletics, replacing Gary Woods in the Management Rep.
Dave Krause, Classified.
Gary Potts, Information Technology, Classified Senate President.
Okay, and for the speakers, the agenda's been posted, and there are speaker cards if somebody would like to speak to the committee. There are speaker cards, I think, on the lectern.
No, they're at the table
in the back,
east side of the room.
Okay, so let me first start. I'm going to take a little liberty in terms of the order because I think it'll make a little more sense. And let me just start with the budget update as having the basis of this conversation. And part of the issue, of course, is that in developing the budget for 2012 and 13, the first issue that we really have to deal with is the current year budget. So I'll start passing handouts out. One of the questions that's come up, and it's a very valid question, is suddenly what has happened that's so changed the game in the current year budget that we established and was adopted by the Board of Trustees in September. So this first one is an email from the system office. Dan Troy, you see, is the Vice Chancellor for Fiscal Policy. And this is an email that he sent to the CBOs, the Chief Business Officials, for all the districts within the community college system. And you can go through there. Certainly I'm not going to read it all, but I do want to highlight the third paragraph. While the fee revenue can shift one way or another over the course of the year, it is large enough that districts should prepare to adjust their budgets accordingly depending on the availability of local resources. Of course, we'll work through the budget process to seek whatever relief we can get, but with a lingering state deficit, our hopes should not be high. The most prudent course is to expect the worst. Okay, so, and you also notice that the date of that was January the 24th. Now then, let me just skip forward a little bit. This is from the Community College League. Now, understand that last year, for those on the committee will remember this, is that we budgeted for a $2 million shortfall because we were expecting that there would be a mid-year trigger cut that would be pulled in December. That trigger cut would be pulled by the Department of Finance, State Controller, when they determined that the tax revenues and the state income was at certain threshold points under the anticipated and projected amount. And of course, we were warned up front by the month that revenues were tracking under projections. Therefore, in December, the trigger was pulled, and in round numbers, we were expecting a $2 million cut. As it turns out, the apportionment was actually cut by $2.1 million, and we just learned that 2 days ago. But the fact is that we were anticipating that cut, and we budgeted for it. So $2 million was set aside in a reserve account and was set aside specifically to cover the eventuality and the probability of that budget cut. So when that budget cut took place, we were ready for that one, and the money has been set aside. Okay, then this is February the 21st, so that's this week. Community college is hit by a February surprise of unexpected additional $149 million budget cut. Now, if you notice in the previous email, the Vice Chancellor in January the 24th was talking about a $100 million cut. Right after that, there was a question, what would happen with property taxes? And the answer was property taxes were also a problem, but they hadn't yet been quantified. Okay, so February the 21st, now the property taxes have been quantified, and there is an expectation of a $149 million shortfall for the system. Rule of thumb for PCC is that 2% of whatever occurs at the state level is PCCs. That would mean that you can do the quick math, that's slightly under $3 million. Okay, then same day, this is again an email from the Vice Chancellor of Fiscal Policy at the Chancellor's Office, Dan Troy. That details the issue a little bit more. $107 million due to a fee revenue shortage and $41 million in property taxes, $1 million in miscellaneous adjustments, and then, of course, the $30 million from the Tier 1 trigger. Okay. Now, this next handout, if you can, it's actually 2 pages, and I neglected to staple them together. This is February the 22nd from the Community College League of California. And if there are leftover, and I think there probably are, anybody in the audience, are you getting them? Okay. Okay, so what this says is this is PCC's anticipated share of the problem for the current year. And you'll see about a third of the way down the page, the total cut for the current year is now $11 million. Now, when you add it all up, we were expecting the $2 million plus now the $3 million, which is roughly $5 million. You see the January trigger cut and the February budget cut tallies up to about $4.8 million. So it's in the exact neck of the woods that we thought. And, of course, the $6.2 million was what we based the original budget on. And you can go through this and see what the expectation is in terms of the impact specifically to Pasadena Area Community College District. Okay. The next handout is a budget simulation for next year based on what we're being told now. So now you'll see halfway down the page for Pasadena Area Community College District, the net apportionment cut expected for next year is about $5.14 million. That's on top of the $11 million that we were just talking about. That then poses a budgetary problem in excess of $16 million. The thing we also have to remember is that we did a couple budgetary gimmicks last year for the current year, which included $1.3 million transfer from the dental fund. Okay, and that's not one of those sustainable things. Now, and let me just discuss one of the methodologies that the district has always used in terms of how we budget is there are sustainable sources of revenue and then there are unsustainable sources of revenue. Sustainable ones that are recurring. They regenerate from one year to the next. Then you have one-time expenses that once they're spent, they're gone. Okay, so one of the underlying budgetary principles of the district is that we will spend ongoing revenue to cover ongoing expenses, and we'll use one-time money in order to expend it on one-time things. Okay, so now the $1.3 million that we transferred from the dental fund into the general fund through a little bit of sleight of hand, that's not repeatable. And therefore, we really have to add, in comparing the current year budget to next year's budget, we have to take the $5.14 million, that's the current projection. That number, by the way, will certainly change, but we don't know which direction. And we have to add the $1.3 million on top of that. So when you work that out, it turns into about $5.5 million for next year, on top of the $11 million for this year. Okay. So now this is a 3-page handout. The first page we've seen last year in developing the 2011-12 budget. This was one of the documents that we used in preparation for that. But I do want to point out a couple things. You'll see that this is a draft version, July the 6th, 2011. So it occurred after the close of the fiscal year, but a couple months before we adopted the budget. These were some of the principles that we were going to use in developing that budget. And what I'd like to show you is the degree to which this is what's actually taken place. So the retirement incentive, we were anticipating $3.14 million. And you'll see that we ended up with 88 people who took that plan. You also see at the bottom it says savings are one-time only. What that means is that, again, once that money is gone, then it's gone. The non-filling of positions is closely tied into that, and that's $2.5 million. You see that it was for administrators, managers, supervisors, and classified workers. You'll also recall that we did hire 22 faculty members as part of the budget plan. We also set aside $1 million to hire additional people, and largely those monies have not been spent yet. Optimized sections, we're expecting $1.5 million as an estimate. See that the first point is to add critical sections. We have almost 1,700 full-time equivalent student workload reduction. And let me just explain the workload reduction principle. Is that the way that the revenue comes to the district has nothing to do with sections. Sections is the expenditure side of the equation, not the revenue side. On the other hand, the full-time equivalent student and the workload is the revenue side. It is not the expenditure side. Those two things are linked, but they are completely separate. So when the state gives us a projected number that they will fund up to, do you remember the exact number, Bob?
Right now, currently we're about $19,634.
Okay. So what they do then is they multiply that times $4,564, and that is the amount of apportionment money that they send. When they wish to send less money, they reduce your workload and they will pay for fewer students. That's the way that the mechanism works. Okay, so this, in the current year, we dropped our full-time equivalent student cap by $1,691. We talked about developing fee-based programs because we're trying to serve the community. However, the question, of course, is whether the community stands in front of students or whether they stand behind and they don't take the actual seats from students. So it's possible, for instance, for a member of the public to wish to have an oil painting class, but they don't have to take it for credit. So if we could develop fee-based classes, then that would take the pressure off of the students and it would bring us additional revenue. Eliminate low-enrolled sections, that's something that we've done for a very long time, but it was something that we last year decided needed to be moved up. And Resource Schedule 25 is a computer software program that enables us to better match our facilities resources in the classroom with instruction. So what that would mean is that if a classroom holds 50, that we try to put 50 enrolled classes and sections in that room. and that we try to have small classes in small classrooms and large classes in large classrooms, and to try to balance that out. In other words, gain efficiency. Revenue enhancement, we didn't expect much money because it was going to take us a little time to gear up for that. Fee-based classes, contract ed, continuing ed, adding international students through the F1 visas, distance education, increased grants, and PCC Foundation support. Those were items that we talked about last year for the current year budget in order to enhance revenue. And then efficiencies, enhanced technology. Part of the deal is that we have an ancient technological system which significantly hurts students. It hurts instruction. It makes it very difficult for us to do what we need to do, and it's expensive. It's expensive to maintain, it's expensive to keep running, and there are quicker, cheaper ways of doing things through technology than what we're currently doing. So there's a budget savings that can be had there too. Energy reduction. We're right now finalizing the installation of 34,000 LED lights to replace the fluorescents, which Dave Krause has largely been responsible for, and that should save us somewhere in the order of half or two-thirds of $1,000,000 per year. If we're not spending on Pasadena Water and Power, it means that we have it available to expend elsewhere. Duplicating costs, overtime, stipends, reassigned times, virtual labs to where students can have a laboratory experience on the campus without being on the campus. Reduce fund transfers, program viability of reviewing the viability of certain programs, and the reduction of hourly workers. Okay, so that was the menu from which we established the current year budget. So just moving over to the next page, the first challenge that we're going to have now is dealing with, in the upper left corner, $2.85 million new problem. That's in addition to what we just did. Okay, the retirement incentive, that has already taken place, so there's no additional funds to be had there. Non-filling of positions, we still have the $1 million in the kitty because we've been very slow in filling those current positions. Now, to be perfectly fair, we've dropped 50% of our custodial staff on a full-time basis. That is not sustainable. Okay, they've been filled largely with hourly employees, but that is not a sustainable practice. At a certain point, you know, if any one of the departments here took a 50% cut, you would not be able to provide the same service that you now do. Okay, the expectation from the custodians, however, is that nothing change in terms of service level. But that's unsustainable. But in any event, that $1 million is still there. The optimization of sections, and we'll have Dr. Bell speak in a minute about the spring forward. You'll see in the previous one we said add critical sections, and the critical sections is through the current process what Dr. Bell has named spring forward, to where we can add sections to students who need them in order to overcome the cutting of sections. Meet legislated workload reduction. There's a new workload reduction of 185 students. Develop fee-based, and the rest of this is fairly similar, but the first issue that we're going to have to wrestle with here is coming up with $2.85 million in the current year. The problem with mid-year cuts, and this is not exactly mid-year cut because it's 8 months in, is that the impact of a mid-year cut is more than the impact of an initial year cut. And the reason is because 2/3 of the year has gone by, and therefore we only have 1/3 of the year to make the changes, which has the effect of tripling the impact had it occurred at the beginning of the year. It means that it becomes more draconian to do it now than it would have been earlier. So if there are any other issues and things that we should have included on the menu, then we need to discuss those, because the first job that we now have is to, where's Tom Burks at? The first challenge that we have is to come up with $2.85 million in the current year. Okay, now, just so that we can see, and I can finish with this presentation here, is next year, as I just pointed out a few minutes ago, we can expect $6.5 million of cut. The retirement incentive, last year we dropped about 100 employees. If we were to imagine doing that again this year, that would be 200 employees, of course. And that's largely through the CERT program, although there have been other people who have resigned or left the organization for one reason or another in addition to that. But if we were to have another 100 employees this year, that would mean that we would be down 1/4 of our workforce, about 400 faculty members, about 400 staff members, it's about 800. So if we were to drop 200 employees, that's a 25% reduction. Okay, that's unsustainable. Non-filling of positions. The reason why the retirement incentive is X'd out is because we actually do have to fill positions. Optimization of sections, revenue enhancement and efficiencies are still, the things that we need to focus on in order to come up with that amount of money. Okay, so the initial discussion that we need to have is going to deal with the guiding principles for the district. This is the same list as last year, with the exception that all the marks have been taken off and everything is now on the table. This is not an exhaustive list, and we can add to it or delete from it, but we need to agree on the guiding principles. Dr. Rocha and the board have put every single option on the table for how to deal with the changes to the budget. And I suppose that what we could do is, if we wanted to do this, we could have, we could do this in 2 steps. One is for the current year and one would be for next year. Or we could combine the two and just say these are the guiding principles and directions from this moment forth. So if you want to go through this and refresh your memories in terms of what we agreed would be the guiding principles and directions for the Budget and Resource Allocation Committee. Okay, has everybody had a chance to go through that? Okay, so let's do this, is let's open this up for discussion among the group, both in terms of where we are and the material I presented in terms of the predicament that we now find ourselves in, as well as the guiding principles and directions. So among the committee. Dave?
Yeah, Rick, what I was looking at is, what I don't see in here is consultant fees. I mean, isn't there a way that possibly we could reduce funds by consultants?
Yes. Okay, so let's add that to the list.
Good point, Dave. Good point. Consultant fees.
Okay.
1 second. Dave, you mean all consultants district-wide or just?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying getting rid of them. I'm saying
reduction.
Reducing them.
Tom?
I've been thinking, I teach in the nursing program, so Health Sciences Division, and I've been thinking about our registered nursing program and how we could be part of the solution. I am on the agenda for the curriculum meetings, the next 2 within our division, to talk about possible change to the RN program that would enormously reduce the amount of overload as well as the amount of adjunct faculty that are utilized. So if it's something that the faculty is willing to adopt, I think it would be a huge money saver. Of course, it's a major curriculum revision, so it would have to be approved by the Board of Registered Nursing, our consultant, and have to go through the C&I committee here. If it could be, if the college, if this all comes to happen, if they could expedite the C&I process, we could, start it sooner.
And the C&I process closes down very quickly for next.
No, actually, we just started the spring cycle, so we've got we're into the spring cycle now. So we've got through.
But when would that be effective? For 12, 13?
It would be effective for well, if you could quickly make the change, which I don't think you can because the state's got to approve it and your accrediting body has to change it, has to approve it. We actually could have it effective summer of 12 because of the catalog restrictions and what have you. But it's likely a summer of 13 change before it would actually go into effect.
Can I just brief? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Can I just briefly tell you what I'm thinking?
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
The associate degree in nursing was originally envisioned that students would take 18 units a semester. They would take their first semester of nursing and they would also take their anatomy and chemistry concurrently with that. And then the next semester they'd take their nursing and take their physiology and microbiology. So they would do it in 4 semesters, and then the second year they would take, nutrition, et cetera. Well, none of our students do that. We have anatomy, physiology, microbiology, and English as prerequisites. So there's no way they can do it in 2 years. Additionally, they take their psychology and their other nutrition, other courses concurrently with some of the harder science classes. So when the students come in, they have the majority of the prerequisites and general education requirements completed. They then get to us and we send them through in 4 semesters on a part-time status. They take 11 units the first semester and they take 9 units the second, third, and fourth semesters. What I'm proposing to the faculty is that we go to 12 units a semester and they complete in 3 semesters instead of 4. We're slightly over. We're only required to have 36 units of nursing. We currently have about 38. So they would achieve full-time status. For their financial aid, they could be covered on their parents' insurance. They would graduate 6 months sooner. Taking the number of full-time faculty that we currently have spread over 4 semesters, we would now spread those over 3 semesters, which would enormously reduce the number of adjunct faculty that were used in the program, because the same number of teachers would be teaching 3 levels instead of 4.
Under the direction of the Academic Senate, and in particular Matthew Jordan, our C&I chair right now, we're taking immediate steps to streamline the C&I process. So anything that comes to C&I, we can pretty much move through very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. But I think conceptually here and philosophically, what Tom is pointing out is that if we had all of our programs, our CTE certificate programs, our academic programs and majors, what have you, all the faculty in the divisions begin to take a look at how they could, quote unquote, more efficiently, and I don't mean that just from the point of view of savings, but even for students, help students to get through these programs more quickly, if you will. That would not only eventually accrue to the benefit from a budget point of view, but it would also accrue to the benefit of our students as we move them along. As far as immediate impact, probably not this year, but certainly going forward next year and following that. So I think the whole notion of program review to more efficiently offer our programs would be a good way to go.
And part of the issue is that this budget problem won't go away. The state economy is not recovering and won't recover very quickly. There is almost no chance that the November ballot measure will pass, which will increase taxes on everyone. And by the way, if it did pass, then the budget cut next year would basically evaporate. But it's predicated on having the voters increase taxes on themselves. With a functional unemployment in California of over 20%, that seems extraordinarily unlikely. And then, of course, the national economy is not picking up. And with a deficit in Washington this year being proposed of $1.5 trillion, that won't allow for economic growth. And, of course, the world economy is going to suffer and will continue to suffer due to the near collapse or imminent collapse of several economies around the world. Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland are on the precipice of taking down the euro. And if that happens, then that's going to have an impact around the world too. So the reality is that we need to be planning our budgets on the basis of what we have we'll be lucky to keep. And, whereas in the past we've tried to kick the can down the road a while to see if the economy would pick up and we'd end up in some kind of nirvana, but that is not likely to occur. So to the extent that it even can't be done this year, setting it up for next year is very helpful. So the question, Tom, is what does it actually take to accomplish, and what's your view on the timeline?
Yeah. Present to the faculty and tell them what my idea is and get a majority of the faculty to say they want to do it. Then we have to write to our consultant from the Board of Registered Nursing and tell them what we have in mind, and then we have to rewrite, write this new curriculum. Now, I've been here long enough that sometimes it takes 3 years to write a new curriculum, and I've seen times when it's taken 1 semester. Personally, I don't think we're making that much of a change. It's more we're resequencing some things. I think we could sit down in 2 weeks and have it done, but the majority of the other people would probably not feel that way, that we could do that. So, a nice vague answer, I don't know.
And procedurally, can it go to C&I before it goes to the accrediting?
No.
No?
Probably not.
Yeah.
So there's no chance that it'll be done for this year? What is the drop-dead date for the C&I, Bob?
A drop-dead date would probably be for something of this magnitude by the end of March, frankly.
Yeah, that
and,
won't happen.
Yeah, I think it'd be tough.
Okay. So if you can continue to develop that, obviously, but for the following year, that would still be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And despite opinions to the contrary, everyone is committed to student success and to making sure that we can do whatever we can do. And minimizing the impact on student access, if you notice, is item number 1 on the overarching guiding principles for the development of the budget. And so just getting back to that one, I would be shocked if anyone had any problems with the all the way down probably 3/4 of the way. I think that the first question might be, the district will contribute $1.4 million to the other post-employment benefit fund if it is not fully funded. I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's probably the first one that people are going to have mixed opinions or disagree with. Is that true? Up to that point, are we clear? That we still agree with all the guiding principles up above that line?
Yeah, I just had one question. The EMP, the first separation that occurs there, is that meant to have another header in it, or is
yeah,
that...
you know what? I quickly did that, and I wiped out all the colors that were there, and apparently I accidentally wiped that one out.
Okay, so that's fine. So you just add that, whatever that header is, we'll add that later. Because I think personally, I think the EMP ones are fine because they're exactly as they continue to be.
Okay, so everybody's clear with the EMPs and the overarching?
Yeah, I have a question on the EMP, Rick. If you go 4 up from the item that you identified, the 1.4 million, where it says the budget will, 18.7 million, the budget will reflect, maintain?
The state's apportionment deferral?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the ending balance that we're expecting. By the way, we are predicting $22 million budget deferral for this year, apportionment deferral. And for the first year, and let me just mention this too briefly, this is the first year that they're projecting that they're going to hold the making up of the apportionment deferral to as long as October. The auditors have significant problem with that because at a certain moment you can no longer attribute that to the current year. So, you know, if it's July, which is what they've largely done in the past, that makes some sense because it's essentially a receivable. The trouble is that when it starts to slide into October, it isn't. And at one point or another, we're going to end up restating our financial situation and drop down the ending balance to reflect whatever it is that we cannot attribute to the current year. So that is going to have an impact if we have to do that. I know that, and I spoke with our auditor, is that they are trying to work out a methodology system-wide of how to deal with that. Because there are 111 other colleges that are in the same boat that we are of how to account for that apportionment deferral that's that long. We were also notified that we will have another intra-year apportionment deferral, which slides it, I think, from February to April. Is that not right, Maria?
February to April.
So it means that apportionment, because the state now has a new cash flow problem, they don't have the money to give us. Therefore, what they're saying is that if they can, instead of paying it out in February, pay it to us in April, when they hope, you know, with the April 15th tax deadline, that they'll end up with more money.
And just to be clear here, the EMP is from transfers to four-year institutions to facilities and other resources will be optimized.
Yes.
Below that is another set of criteria.
There's a double line that
right.
I should put the black back in there, the black background, because it's white letters on black, and I took the black out.
Yeah.
So I'll figure out what that one was. But so up to the first break, which is facilities and other resources will be optimized. That's under educational master plan.
Right.
So in terms of the committee right now of the guiding principles, we're clear up to that point. Is that true? Does anybody have any objections?
Yeah, I just have a question as far as clarifying when you were mentioning that they were going to delay the apportionment from February to April. That's this year.
That's current year. That's an
Current year.
intra-year. There are two apportionment deferral methodologies, intra-year and inter-year. Okay, the intra-year, they don't pay us the money that they owe us in the order that we need it. If they did, we'd get about $10 million a month. That never happens. So the first few months they overpay us, and then they start to very significantly underpay us. So from about January through June, we are very significantly underapportioned. And that number this year, by the end of June, we will have $22 million slip into the following year that they've promised they'll make up, and that's enacted into law. But then they're saying that for the first year, they're going to defer that further into the year,
Right.
possibly as late as October.
Right.
What that means is that in order for us to make payroll and pay our bills, we have to have cash on hand. Now, and Maria's gone through and done a pretty careful analysis of where we're going to end up June the 30th, and the current projection is that we'll have $4 million in cash. No, sorry,
Will reduce because of the 2.1.
in an ending balance. That is not strictly cash, because we also have receivables that's tallied into that number. So when you're looking at an ending balance, that does not mean cash in the bank. So now, the board has also authorized us to do inter-fund borrowing. There are two possible avenues for us to do that, and there are restrictions that the board's placed on us to do it. But the first is the other post-employment benefit fund, and because we have not structured to be irrevocable, we can actually tap into that money. Many districts have made it irrevocable to where you can't go back and tap into it, which actually helps in terms of the financial statements of the organization. The trouble is that if you do that, then you don't have access to that money anymore. And I think it's about $16 million that we have. The other post-employment benefit fund is established in order to cover the promises that we've made to current employees and retired employees for their health care. We cover 100% of health care costs for employees who retire and are less than age 65. Then we pay $1,440 per year per employee who is retired over the age of 65. There was a recent ruling or decision that was made that said that you had to actually account for that money somewhere. So it now shows up as an obligation that we have to pay. If you do that, and it's a liability. Therefore, it's an unfunded liability if you don't have money to cover it. So what we've done is, rather than setting it aside in a completely separate, untouchable fund, we've put it into a fund that we can tap into if we have to, and we will. But what it does is then we've created an asset that immediately offsets the liability. So the bottom line to the organization is no change to the financial position. If we didn't fund it, then we'd have a $16 million liability with no money to cover it, which would then show, obviously a $16 million problem and growing per year for our liabilities. Is that clear? Yeah, Danny?
Yeah. During the discussion last year, I believe that fund you stated was overfunded by between $600,000 and $700,000. Is that correct?
And we just did the study on that again, and I think that we're very close now. Is that not true?
Yeah, we're very close.
So what it means, yeah, that is still true, and I think that an assumption that we can make for the current year is that we do not have to put money into that to cover increased liability. One of the challenges that we faced is that we had to work out what potential impact the SERP had on our liabilities. So we did an actuarial study to determine that. And as it turns out, what's more important than the number of people who retired, because that does lock in the number, is as you add employees, then you have to start covering them. Because they do, we are creating an expectation of future benefits that we have to cover.
So can we say district will not contribute? Up
Yeah,
to
and
1.4?
so up to and that's why I drew a line at that one.
Yeah.
Is I think that it's probably fair to say that something like the district does not need to contribute additional funds to the other post-employment benefits. Is that reasonable? Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
So was that 1.4 million in this year's budget?
No. In order to balance the budget, we decided to, that was another one of the things that we pulled. And so if you go back and see, we did not put that in the current year budget.
So we're not making...
We're not doing it now for the current year, and we won't. What we said was if it is not fully funded, so that was another way that we cut the current year budget. Dave?
Okay.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, we did have a retirement in December, another one coming up in June.
Yes.
And I know you're saying that the funds for that has got to go for employees. Can we show that, how much savings there is that's going to go towards the hiring of new employees?
And I'm not quite sure how to quantify that yet. I think that, and of course this is going to be the guiding principles. What we're saying up top is the impact of state budget on full-time PCC employees will be minimized. And I'm not sure if that's not covered in it. It is something that we're going to have to wrestle with, of how many new employees must we hire, and how many can we afford. I don't know. I truly don't know what the answer is to that either.
Yeah, because I didn't want to say, well, you know, you have $1 million aside, but yet you may have $500,000 savings of people that retired that can actually go towards that $1 million.
Well, and I think that and if you can just hold that thought, because we're going to discuss that here in a minute. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Tom?
I had another curriculum thought. I'm not sure where to interject it here in the agenda. Is this okay? You know, I'm wondering about the cost of requiring all of the students to take physical education. It's my understanding that's a district requirement, not a state requirement. Does that sound accurate?
Dr. Bell?
Oh.
Actually, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I believe it is a local district requirement. I don't believe the state requires that.
That is correct, and I think, Ed, you can verify that for us?
So what I have wondered with this is by us requiring something that the state does not require, one, the students have to take another class, which takes them longer to graduate. We have to offer a certain number of sections, you know, so they can take these courses. And I just wonder about what would be the fiscal impact of us dropping that district requirement.
And let me have John Woods address it, because he's the person over there.
Well, I think when you look at one of the guiding principles that you have is health and wellness, well-being, and education. I think if you look at the current status of this country in terms of its level of fitness, they've just, if the information is correct, they've added actually semesters of physical education back into the high schools as a result of what we're seeing as a dynamic and a deteriorating health status of this country. And so I think when we start looking at the general educational requirements of PCC, I think we need to consider some of those things. Also, the kinesiology transfer students are required to take 4 semesters of activity coursework. So I think there's more to be discussed than just automatically throwing any particular subject onto the board. I'm certainly willing to discuss it, but I think there's more. If we're going to look at physical education, then we need to look at other programs and what those requirements are. So,
well, sir, like for example, I mean, nursing, the whole thing is about health and well-being and promoting health and this, and our students still have to take physical education. I just, where I'm going, I understand the merits of it. The question I have is given the current fiscal crisis, why do we require more than what the state says we have to require? And what is the fiscal impact of us having requirements exceeding what the state requires?
I would actually, just from the student trustee perspective, agree with Tom's comment in as much that I think it's a conversation that we need to have in terms of, does a transfer student, do certain transfer students that want to get an AA as well, for example, if they're majoring in philosophy, need to take that PE course? I'd like to think not specifically at this moment, and I think it is a discussion worth having moving forward for the reasons that Tom just stated.
Well, again, I think we can certainly put any issue on the table. I think we look at the number of courses that are actually required for transfer. Specifically, there's 13 or 17, yet we offer a significantly larger number of courses in our curriculum that meet that same requirement. And so, when we start looking at not only our requirements, but requirements that a student needs to transfer in a particular subject, we need to have that discussion also. And it will engage more departments than just the kinesiology, health, and physical education. So,
Ed? Yeah.
Just as background, this issue was discussed 2 or 3 years ago as it came up through the CNI, the Curriculum Instruction Committee process, when we looked at the requirements for the associate's degree. So there were discussions about the value of the PE requirement for the associate's degree. And I suspect that that'll come up again. But just to let you know that students do not necessarily have to have PE as part of their overall general education. There are many students who identify themselves as being transfer students. Their plan is to transfer. They follow IGETC, or the CSU GE breadth requirement, which does not require physical education. So in other words, it's a requirement only for the associate's degree. It's not necessarily a GE requirement for many students.
So those students earn an associate degree in transfer studies without taking the phys ed?
It is possible, because for students who are transferring and they are getting one of our current AA degrees, they have the option of actually following our local associate degree requirements. That does include PE, or following IGETC or the CSU GE requirements, and those two patterns do not necessarily include general education, physical education.
Okay. Kent?
To my understanding also that there may be other locally defined or courses. It's not just physical activity, but there could be other local ones to get an AA degree. And those should be perhaps discussed as well.
There is a category under the local associate degree requirements, the health education category. Although it does align well with the GE requirements for the Cal State system, although not for IGETC. So there is some room for maneuver, you might say, but it's sort of a tricky area. It's a gray area in between what the UCs want and what we require here locally.
Bob?
You know, some of this is going to perhaps be self-correcting as we get more engaged in what we call strategic enrollment management, and as we look at developing schedules that support the completion agenda, transfer degrees, CTE certificates, and then as we look more at the course-taking behavior, and then offer more of those sections. So what I mean by all this is that the division deans and the faculty are going to be looking at the breadth, perhaps, that they have been offering in the past and being a little bit more selective about the courses they offer that lead to greater completion on the basis of the courses that students need in order to move through our system much more quickly. So again, some of this will be self-correcting as time goes on based upon the limited FTES that we have to work with these days.
You know, and on that note, Bob, you know, all of the nursing students have to take Psychology 24. It's not a prerequisite, but it's content required for licensure, so they have to have it. And most of the students have it before they come into the program. One of my students who completed the first semester of the nursing program wanted to take that over the winter, and she said that there were no offerings of Psychology 24 over the winter. Now, I didn't go on the computer to look and see if it was offered or not, but you know, we award over 100 associate degrees every year in nursing. Those students all have to have it. I also think that the dental hygiene and the LVN students have to have that as well. So there is, from a health sciences perspective, there are some courses that are really in high demand that it appears are not being scheduled to accommodate those students.
And two general responses to that. And just looking quickly at the top 25 courses by enrollment and then the top 50 courses by enrollment, neither of the Psych 24 is not one of those. So what this suggests is that from an interdisciplinary point of view or from an interdivision point of view, better communication needs to take place between health sciences and social sciences to make sure that we offer those sections. And then, from an enrollment priority point of view, we need to make certain that, as Dr. Bell and I are looking at each other, that we get those students that are in those programs into those sections in order to support those pathways. Because what's happening now is you open up a Psych 24 section, and because it probably works for general IGETC and CSU transfer as well, which we know it does, students who don't necessarily need it for their majors get into those programs anyway. So that's just again a better structure, and with Vice President Cable here and the technology that the new administrative information system will provide, we'll be able to better deal with those issues going forward. It's all about enrollment management, which we don't do a whole lot of yet, but we're working our way towards that.
Okay. Moving on, let me go down. The district will set aside $1 million to the Enterprise Resource Plan, which is now called the Administrative Information System. Dwayne?
Yes.
Administrative Information System. Okay. Now, traditionally, what we've done is that we see how we end the year. And to the extent that we end the year under budget, we fund one-time expenses. The Administrative Information System is a one-time expense. Theoretically, it is possible to budget that and to budget it through the operational unrestricted general fund. The trouble in doing that, of course, is that you're going to end up cutting $1 million from somewhere else in order to do it. I don't think there are too many people in the world who think that it's a bad idea to upgrade our computer system to actually enter into the 21st century, because right now I think we're firmly planted at the end of the 20th century. The challenge is, and this is a guiding principle that we don't have to adopt, by the way, we do need to find funding for the Administrative Information System. It does not need to occur through a $1 million set-aside. Dave?
Well, you know, if we, I don't know how long it would take to implement it, but I think maybe the students might benefit more from more classes rather than a new integrated system.
Let me have, Dwayne, if you can you just address that point about the need for upgrading the system and the interrelationship between the success of students through technology versus additional classes?
Well, I think part of the, you know, this is a really an interesting balancing issue. You know, we have, my concern right now is that we have the ability, very limited ability with our existing Santa Rosa administrative information system to effectively process students through our system, to admit, register financial aid. And in the 6 months I've been here, we have continued to put additional Band-Aids and duct tape on the existing system. My concern is this, it's twofold. One is I think we keep making additional modifications to our existing environment. It's creating kind of waterfall effects, if you will, of additional problems. And plus I just expect that one day our systems are just going to go down and I can't bring them back up. And I've actually are planning for that to figure out what we're going to do in case that type of scenario presents itself. So and as we've gone through this, as we get ourselves to a point where we can actually put a new system in place, because you know, if we did a traditional implementation, that's 2 years. We can't do that. I am very uncomfortable with that type of an implementation plan. We have to do something very aggressively, else we risk losing data, not effectively helping students with the ed plans. In fact, we're actually rewriting ed plan right now, and I have well, I have concern. I approved it, but we are expending a certain amount of effort just to get something back in place that really will be a direct benefit to all of the students, when I know that our new administrative information system will actually address that. And plus, there's just a host of other requests that helps us operationally from an efficiency standpoint across the institution, that if we could get this new system in place, there'll be a lot of, I think it will help us on the cost side of the house, where we're actually revisiting issues of staffing. You know, we're staffing right now, or thinking about our staffing plans based on the kind of environment we're currently working in. And if we had a new system in place, the few people that we have now will be much more productive. This will keep our ongoing recurring costs down. So it really has it has lots of different effects throughout the institution, and to take a 30-year-old system and, you know, there's really no question we need to replace it. My only concern is how quickly can we do it. And I know that's an expenditure of funds, but maintenance-wise, I do think that as we select a new system, we're going to probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 annually in maintenance costs. Maintenance costs associated with software, hardware, or maybe the service provider that we're having. So I have a tendency to want to, we need to budget that sort of thing from an operational standpoint, because we would never not pay a maintenance agreement and have support for that system. It's too critical to our overall institutional operations. So, you know, whether we do $1 million or not is a different issue. But I do think that we really have to look at a recurring line item to address that. Our AIS I really feel is fundamental to everything that we provide our students, and the ability for them to access a lot of services 24/7, 52. We can web enable a lot of these things that right now that we're going to that students are having to go to offices to address. I think will be a huge service to students. I had students this morning in my office saying, I've just been all over campus trying to get this and get that, and now I'm down here for my 1098 for tax purposes, and it's like one thing after another that we're running students all over the place. Our new AIS will help address those things.
And if I may, with respect to financial aid, Alex, what our current system obligates us to do is to generate hard copy checks and mail those to students. So we're delayed about 3.5 to 4.5 weeks later than our sister campuses on getting awards to students. And there's also the cost of physically printing the check, mailing the check, the postage, everything inherent with that, and lost checks. A new AIS system integrated with a direct deposit would allow us to be able to directly deposit those receipts into students' accounts immediately. So there is that time and cost as well. It really speaks to efficiencies as well as costs.
So in terms of the effect to students, if a student gets a class and gets financial aid, there could be a possibility that they may have to go back and tell whoever's collecting the bills, hey, I got to wait a couple weeks more than my colleagues at other community colleges because my school doesn't do a direct deposit because of its AIS system.
That's correct. The student at Pasadena City College who is fully enrolled in 12 units or more at the beginning, for example, of this spring semester, your analogy of paying the bills, not get that physical check until about the middle to the end of the 4th week of the semester.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was all clear and on the record right
Gary?
now.
Gary?
I just wanted to make a comment about it. I've worked in computing services for years. I was the operator for years. And all these systems that we're talking about is not integrated at all. Like they said, you have to get into one system, once a student registered, to go into a financial system, et cetera. I agree with Dr. Bell that the problem is that, for example, I was talking to a student yesterday. She said she needed to buy a book, but her financial aid check doesn't come until next week. Well, we all know the semester has started. She's going to be a whole week behind. An integrated system will prevent that because it'll allow, like Dr. Bell said, for those checks to go into a direct deposit. So there is no interlink between the various systems. It's all manual. I'm sure fiscal and financial aid and everyone else could attest to that.
Daniela?
I just have a question. I'm not disputing the fact that a new AIS system will be extremely beneficial as far as improving efficiency and all of those sorts. However, from my point of view as a student, I mean, I've been on campus for several things, so I'm used to the system already. And my struggle would be like, how would students at large would account for maybe the fact that we're investing $1 million into a new information system, whereas essentially my question is, does it have to be specifically $1 million, or is there a way to do this in like a gradual thing, or I don't know what the different alternatives for that are.
That's part of our process right now. We're in the selection process with this. We will be having, in fact, we selected yesterday, we will be having 3 vendors on campus, and part of what they're going to do is to demonstrate their functionality and all of that, and is another aspect of it is to look at different financial models in terms of how we're going to pay for this, or how's the service going to work. So we still have a lot of that to analyze once we get to that point.
And let me just add something here, is to make what Dwayne said a little bit earlier more clear. What he said was that we're on the verge of computer collapse. So if we imagine that if the system collapses, what impact does that then have on the students? And is that an overstatement, Dwayne?
No.
Okay, now we have already set aside about $8 million for this project. So we've continued to save our money in the capital outlay fund for that eventuality. And what is your sense of what we need to spend for the system and how the funds might roll out over the implementation?
I think that I mean, there will be, as part of this plan, and we discussed it yesterday in a meeting, that there will be essentially a 10-year cost plan presented as part of this process. And it will, we've already discussed and looked at possible models. I think the ranges are, when you start doing 100% and 200% ranges, it becomes a little bit of an exercise in futility, I think, to really look at that right now. But I think that's part of what we come back in this process, and in fact, it's something that this committee ought to certainly look at once we present those various models to say, here are our choices, and let us show you, how the numbers fall. So I do think that there are some one-time costs associated with this. I mean, we have to buy software, or we have to buy a service that delivers the software. It doesn't necessarily have to purchase software. We can say, we don't want to own any of this. We don't want to own the systems. We want the vendor to actually host this for us. That's called a cloud-based solution, and we could go down that path. That has a different cost model, and other applications that need to be tied to that, we would need to look at those costs that might not be delivered in the new AIS. But another aspect of this, though, I think it kind of addresses a little bit of your point, Alex, that I wanted to make sure we talked about. You take class scheduling as an example. One of the things we've run into today, we have maximized our capabilities with our existing Santa Rosa system to add additional parameters for even more effectively scheduling the classrooms we have. We are tapped out of additional data elements that will add more variables to how can we better get all 300 classrooms properly scheduled. So we still have a little bit of anomalies, and to add that extra functionality in Santa Rosa is just very expensive, and again, another finger in the dike of the whole Santa Rosa system, and I'm afraid more of those we keep doing becomes problematic.
So I have a few more questions, two related to this and one unrelated to this that I'm going to make just because I have to leave for class pretty soon. My first question being, I know we've heard from students in terms when enrolling online that sometimes the system will crash with a certain amount of students. I would like to clarification on how many students it takes right now for our system to crash in terms of enrollment, as well as will a new AIS correct that? And then my other question related to this is just what I'm hearing is that because of our current AIS system, nothing on campus is integrated. So does that mean that, for example, if a student has an educational master plan on an education plan on file, then we cannot identify them while they are enrolling? And would a new AIS be able to help us identify those students and kind of help them match up while they're currently enrolling?
Let me deal with the first or the last question, I guess, first. First of all, we do have some degree of integration, okay? And there's a lot of data. That data will obviously go through some cleansing process, but we will be able to capture a lot of that. The institution has just gone through a process, a little bit of a process, for process improvement. It is well attended by various departments throughout the institution to actually map our existing processes or some critical ones and improve those. Those new improved processes will be part of the new AIS structure. So not all is lost. Okay, there is certainly a lot of things that we will have that will be able to transition from the old to the new. There will be a number of things though that won't transition, but things like ed plans and stuff like that is really data that can be moved into a new environment once we know what that new environment is going to look like, and then we can see what it's going to take to lose those sorts of things. Other types of capabilities that will be added. I feel that will really benefit the students and the departments are things like electronic portfolios, to where every student can have their own portfolio, every faculty and staff member can have their own portfolio, so things can actually be filed away and it's part of their record. So we still have a lot of integration. Remind me what your first question was again.
The first one was how many students it takes for the system to crash.
Yeah, the crash. I have no clue. You know, we have a lot of reasons for why. I won't say a lot of reasons. We have a variety of reasons for why systems crash. System performance itself, again, I've already mentioned we have a 16-year-old hardware. We've maxed its memory and those types of things. That's one aspect that causes systems to be slow. Another one is our network capacity. How many people hit our network, whether it's relating to our systems or not. We are looking at those issues as well to make sure that we have expanded that capacity for the new system. And then how the software itself functions. Right now we have some of our processes are actual physical process that some staff member within my department or another department actually turns on or turns off. And when they fail to do that, folks can't log in or can't do the things they need.
There is another point, and I just realized this, and then
you're out of questions.
Let me just ask. Let me just ask one thing. But what occurred the other day was also an attack on the system. Is that not true?
That is correct. We had well over 1,000 hits per second on our network, and 1,000 plus hits a second. That's a lot of volume, and basically it ends up freezing a lot of other individuals out of our network because something is trying to attack it.
Okay, and in terms of, I know as a student, going in and enrolling online, you get kicked out after 15 minutes. Would a new AIS alleviate that?
Well, that's a rule that is set that if there's inactivity for a certain period of time, then you get kicked off. The question comes is, you know, what you're doing on the system to, I mean, it shouldn't just while you're in the middle of something knock you off after 15 minutes. I'm not exactly sure what that particular rule is if you're experiencing that.
I can say that it has occurred where you're just kind of looking through the class schedule, finding a class really quickly, and it will just kick you out at times and say you're inactive even though you're scrolling and trying to find.
Yeah, well, that really shouldn't be.
And then
maybe it's just you, Al.
From what I've heard, it's not.
I'm just kidding, of course.
And then just the last thing before I leave, I noticed, maybe I overlooked it, but I noticed that on the paper that we're given in terms of priorities, I don't see anything about trying to see what we can do in terms of, because there were students that mentioned it at the last Board of Trustees meeting, increasing class size in certain classes. And one, why isn't it on here perhaps for a few classes to do that? And two, what problems the district or the college may face in trying to move forward in that direction. And then with that, I will be leaving because I have class and I'm already late.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I'm sure that we're not the only college that is looking to upgrade their systems. And I believe other colleges already have upgraded their systems. Have we looked into what they have and see if it worked for us and not have to have consultants come in because the system's already been designed?
Well, first of all, every institution runs their business in a different way. There's different sets of rules. We know what new systems have been going in across the state, across the country. We have focused a lot more on what's happening in California and what systems are being used there. You know, as we look at implementing the system, we're certainly going to have consulting resources to help us with that because we couldn't sit and do this ourselves. We don't have enough knowledge of the system and its functionality. And then partnering, we've even are exploring the idea of what are some of our sister institutions, whether it's a private university or another community college, looking at possible partnerships and how we might be able to work that angle. Again, the concerns is that institutions have different rules and in terms of the way they do business, and we have to just be real careful with that. But we're exploring those avenues too, but we do know what's happening at other colleges.
Danny?
I just a question. You mentioned, and I know you don't have a developed plan, but there's one possibility that you go to a cloud system where we don't own anything, and another system where we would own everything. And I think I've also heard you mention that you'd like to implement this system within 18 months to 24 months, or something like that. Is that correct?
Yes, or less.
Okay.
Yes.
So how much, I mean, I know you don't have the plan, but I mean, just ballpark figures. I mean, because the two would be very different, I would think. The cloud system, you're not paying for everything up front as opposed to the other. But could you just give us a ballpark figure what each of these might cost over the next 18 to 24 months or whatever?
I think I will be in a much better position once I have at least the first rounds from the 3 different vendors, because part of what we're going to be asking them to do is to present to us what would a traditional, and of course to them, traditional is more like 36 to 48 months, but we're saying traditional is 24 months, an aggressive schedule is 18 months, and a very aggressive schedule, which is 12 months. Yes, those will all cost different because they take more resources to do something in a shorter period of time. Cloud doesn't necessarily mean free. It certainly doesn't, because I think you pay one way or another, and I think we're all smart enough to realize that. The question is it worth it to us if I don't have to have, for instance, if we didn't run our own systems, then I don't have to hire a database administrator. Which is a good 6-figure type of individual with certain capabilities. I wouldn't necessarily have to have a systems person. There's personnel on an ongoing basis that I would avoid by not having to, that I can buy that portion of that from a vendor. And so we want to explore those types of options, else I have to get down this other column that says we have to staff accordingly to address those types of needs. And frankly, I would a whole lot rather spend more focus on staffing in areas where we can actually work inside the business office or inside the admissions office or the registration or human resources, focused on applications and process issues rather than, and the functionality of the software, rather than actually having technical people sitting back in a cubicle somewhere needing to be concerned about how to do, modify systems or do reports or those types of things.
So you said after you get, oh, I'm sorry.
So until I get to that, if you could give at least a little bit of time to get some feedback from these vendors, I can be a lot more accurate. I think I'm on record at a board meeting saying that the initial cost would be somewhere between $3 and $8 million, or $3 and $6 million in the first year, and then another, I think half of that each year in addition in the coming years following that. So $3 million to $6 million in the first year, $1.5 million to $3 million in the second year. Again, it depends a lot on the solution that's put in place and how it's put in place.
Sure.
Okay.
And when are you, I mean, these first bids or proposals or whatever, when is that going to happen, and then when do you think you could come back to this committee?
We are still on target for having a decision made by the end of June.
A decision made, but I mean...
Well, we will know what our costs are going to be in a 10-year mapped-out plan by that time, because we won't be going to the board with anything other than a 10-year picture. So we'll know what those costs are going to be.
So you won't have any even estimate before June for us in this committee to consider or talk about?
We could have estimates. I'm actually talking about what we know what the real numbers are going to be, because while we know what the AIS may have as part of its solution, there may be areas where there are gaps in its functionality, and we need to acquire that from some other source. That may take us a little longer to get to those numbers. You know, it may be I sit here and I think about fundraising software or human resources software with respect to, web-based professional development planning and performance evaluations, stuff that most AISs won't have.
Well, like for instance, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you said it was $3 to $6 million in the first year and $1.5 to $3 million in the second year, so the first year would begin this coming June, so that would be for 2011-12?
1st of July.
Yeah, okay, so that would be 11, 12,
It'd
sorry,
be the
12,
12,
13,
13, 12,
and then
13 budget.
14. So even at those maximum amounts, you're talking 9 million, we already have 8 million, and that would be in the next 2 fiscal years. So to say that I mean, that's why just having a rough idea helps me say, well, do we really need to put aside $1 million? We're in a crisis right now.
Well, we'll understand too that that budget that Dr. Van Pelt has mentioned not only includes what we need to deal with our AIS, but it's also all the other things that surround it. We have network upgrade issues. We've got security audit issues that we need to address. There's a number of things that we're currently doing that are coming out of that same pot, and even hiring consultants to deal with the existing Santa Rosa system, helping us with programming efforts and that sort of thing. All of that come out of that pool.
Let me suggest, though, and I do want to take a comment from a student. Let me do that one first. And I can't read the last name, but Andrew, I do know. Is it Bolt? Bot. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the discussion for the computer upgrade. Obviously, if the system's imminently crashing or it could happen, that's something that needs to be focused on. But at the same time, I think it can be very easy when a budget gets threatened for things to become very doom and gloom. It seems like there are 2 very different issues with the computer upgrade. One being some great integration we can do to make things easier for students. For example, the financial aid obviously would be really helpful. I mean, I'm getting financial aid right now, and getting it 4 weeks sooner would be great. But if the choice is taking a class or getting my financial aid a couple weeks later, I would take a class instead. So I just think it's important to separate the possible system crashing items that need to be taken care of immediately and the possible upgrades that would help students in the school just in general. So in other words, separating those things from the things that must happen, that really need to happen for the school to continue moving forward into this century and for the systems to not be crashing and us not worrying about that, but saving the things that maybe can be waited on for a little bit later, like integrating the financial aid or some of the other areas where it would be helpful for students.
No, and I mean, your point's well taken, and part of what we're even discussing is a multi-phased implementation.
Right.
Whereas instead of having 100% of the system implemented in a very quick period of time, which would be much more expensive than maybe having 2/3 of the system, but in all areas, in other words, up to a minimum level that can get us working and operating. These are issues that we're really going to consider. And while maybe some applications adding on to the, bolting on to the new AIS might be nice, they're not absolutely essential, and if we have these budget constraints, and I've been through these at many other institutions, that we really do have to make those choices at some point in time, and that's why we have a process that we do like this and others to make those kind of decisions. It could be that I talk to Ben and we say, well, Ben, over in HR, and we say we don't implement this maybe for another 1.5 to 2 years until the funding settles. So I get your point, and it's a very valid one, and we do that.
Good. So is the $1 million the bare minimum to stop the system from crashing, or is that the hopeful amount to implement all these different things?
Well, as I viewed this $1 million, and I'm really not sure about the total objective of the $1 million, in that I feel that we are going to have ongoing maintenance costs that we really have no choice in dealing with. And that's going to easily be in the $500,000 range. That it's going to be standard every year. So frankly, we need to budget for that. That needs to be in operating. It doesn't need to be sitting over in a capital fund that.
Can't be.
In other words, there's no real choice here. And in those types of things, I think we need to be budgeting that inside some type of a maintenance account.
What I would propose that the language be, instead of the $1 million, something along the lines of the district will continue to fund the implementation of the administration information system as possible, or something along those lines. So that it's not specifically tied to the $1 million. Is that acceptable to everybody? Yeah?
And then just a final comment. Thanks for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Just as a final comment, it seems like, I'm not sure who put together the possible cuts or the possible ways we can save money, but it seems like a lot of people in this room have a lot more ideas than are on here. That maybe it would be a good idea to put together a time where there's some brainstorming or something to that effect. But I mean, it seems like it's difficult to even get down this list because so many more ideas are popping up already. So it just seems like some time needs to be set aside for everyone to let those ideas happen. So even more ideas can happen, and we're not limited to just what's on this list.
Well, and the idea is that this group represents the entire constituency of the college, and there will be brainstorming. And as you know, Tom Berg mentioned earlier, he's got an idea. So as people come forward with ideas, yes, they are going to be incorporated. That is the role of the committee.
Right. Well, thanks a lot.
Okay. And there's another student, and I'm not sure certainly of the pronunciation, but I think it might be Konchik. And if you could say how you really pronounce.
My name is Kaushik Bhimraj. And I'm an international student in this college, and I've been in this college for 1.5 years, and counting the spring semester, it would be 2 years. My question regarding the new AIS is most of the students, they find it difficult to go to the open classes and find their section numbers and go back to the registration system. And by the time they do this, their 15 minutes is up. So they're automatically kicked out. My question is that in the new AIS, will this open classes be integrated into the system so that you can save a lot of time? And at the same time, the volume in your servers will greatly be reduced. So is there anything that you're considering doing, integrating into the new AIS?
First of all, I will get to the bottom of the 15-minute issue. I'm intrigued by that. I know that in the old days, you have a tendency to clock folks' access to systems because there weren't that many open stations that were out there around the campus that folks, we didn't want folks planning themselves there for very long. I'm not sure why the rule is what it is, and I'm going to dig into that so that by next meeting we certainly have some understanding about it. In fact, I may find a way to communicate that on a campus-wide basis. But the new system, though, and to me, those issues like that are rules-based. I could set 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 days, if I wanted to. So I really want to find out why we have that particular issue. But when systems do sit, like when you're banking online, if you sit there for longer than 5 to 10 minutes, it will log you out. Even when I've actually gone over and looking to transfer funds from one area to another, and then I come back, my time has expired. And it's like, that's interesting. I hope we're not having that same kind of situation. But the new AIS will be much more efficient for you to use. You shouldn't have those types of time constraints. And you'll be able to find out a lot more information a lot faster 24/7, 52.
All right. And one more thing is that, I'd just like to add, the classes which have been canceled, the 96 sections, is there any way that the students, is there a way to communicate it to the students, like well in advance or with more efficiency, like text messaging or like the campus police?
You want to deal?
Yeah, I'll take that one. We hope there are more ways to do it efficiently, and I'm going to stick with the conversation about the AIS. One of the things that we're troubled with and we struggle with, the challenge is in the 21st century, the way we communicate in characters, 120 characters, which is the ideal and the most optimal way to communicate, we can't do in our current system. And so we're somewhat hamstrung. We have to send email blasts and those kinds of things, which are, in my opinion, marginally effective communicating with students, particularly in real time. So there is a challenge. We are looking at how best to facilitate that communication with students, again, in a real-time environment. But we are limited in our capabilities of doing that in the current system.
Well, one of the things, too, that I think we want to explore, and we're going to be working with Student Services actually, I think it came up during the last board meeting with respect to email. You know, most students have their own email, like I'm also discovering some employees have their own emails. That we really actually have a pasadena.edu email address for every single student so that there is an official communication strategy for how we can at least talk. Let's at least make the 20th century email system work the way it needs to, and then maybe we'll come up with some new ones in the 21st century, okay? But we want to at least take that step and get all students on email, and we are looking at trying to look at a fall rollout of that strategy, but we really need to coordinate that across the institution. We're also going to set some ground rules for the employees of the institution. When I can see some employees with Yahoo and Hotmail and Earthlink accounts and communicating with me, and I'm looking to have to respond back to these. Well, who is this person? Well, wait a minute, I recognize that's an employee, that's a faculty member, or that's a staff member, and they're not using the pasadena.edu. We need to get everybody on the same page, at least with some email. And then you can forward that to whatever private email you want, but at least we have an official communication strategy for communicating with staff and faculty with students. So hopefully that will help. But we also are looking or exploring at social media type software too in the new environment, so that we have other mechanisms where we can use your phone and other ways of maybe doing blasts like that to get certain messages out. Okay?
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, let me address a possible guiding principle that Alex mentioned before he left. And the language I came up with is class sizes will be optimized to match resources and expectations.
I think that there's potentially a problem with that because, and Ed, do you want to speak to this? I see you rising, so I'll let you speak to it.
I think that it's important to be aware that class size, maximum class size, or what's referred to also as the NCN, the normal closing number, is something that is set through the curriculum process.
Right, understood.
So it's set really with pedagogy as the primary consideration. What is the maximum number of students that can be in a class to optimize success for those students?
And if I can tag on to that, that brings us back to the notion of strategic enrollment management, because if an NCN, for example, is set at 40, and because of the curriculum and instruction and or pedagogical needs established by C&I, that number drops to 35. That just means that we need more sections of that particular class, which means that we cannot offer sections of other classes. So it's just a question of how we allocate our resources, and again, it takes us back to the student course-taking behavior and the completion agenda. So the NCN is not as important as as just how we allocate resources to get people out of here more quickly.
No, I realize that the purview here is the resources for budgetarily. The issue, of course, is that what Alex mentioned is that I think there are ways of gaining efficiency.
Right.
And let me just address a point that I do think is kind of critical, and I think it gets lost a lot, and that's the relationship between FTS and the cap, and the number of sections that are offered, and the number of seats that are actually available for people to learn in, the enrollments. So the FTS dictates our funding and our revenue stream. The sections is what determines our expenditures. But ultimately, the number that is the most important is the enrollment. So if the enrollment, and I understand that it might have dropped by 5% last year, if the total number of seats available to students, if that number were to remain constant, then the impact to students can be negated. True?
Right.
But it has nothing to do with the FTS cap. That just sets the amount of money that we get from the state. To use the section count as the barometer or the metric that we use is kind of a false metric.
Right, and so from an FTES, from the point of view of using our FTS as effectively as possible, then we look to the possibility of different types of teaching modalities. whether it's online, whether it's large group instruction. There are other ways in which to exact greater financial efficiencies by using different methods of instruction, hybrid instruction, and what have you.
Without reducing the impact or improving the impact to students.
Exactly right. And so much of this is tied up in the academic and professional matters issue, and you're right, it's a delicate balance between resource allocation from a financial point of view and academic quality and integrity.
But I think that it's important for us to not use the section count as the sole metric.
That's correct. And I think going forward, Dr. Bell and we've talked at length about budgeting on the basis of FTES versus full-time faculty, full-time equivalent faculty that we have, and approaching our whole method of building schedules in a different manner, which I think going forward we're going to start doing with our deans as we work this through.
Because on a theoretical basis, we could greatly increase and exceed our FTS cap without increasing cost.
That is correct.
Okay, now that's an interesting dynamic that could take place.
That's right.
And I think it's one that ultimately needs to be explored by this group, is if you're trying to match finite resources with a greater demand, then it's important to come up with some balance.
And that's why there's been great discussion of late about blending enrollment management, planning and priorities, and Brac together, because together all of these things have got to be looked at in a larger way.
Okay, let's move on in the guiding principles. Compensation, there will not be a cost of living adjustment. I think that's a fair statement. The district will cover step, column, and longevity costs. I'm not sure that that can be adopted anymore. Now, we could include it as a guiding principle that is not adopted, but at this point, I think that's one of the items that needs to be on the table, is that one of the options that we could do is to suspend the step, column, longevity increases. That's an option. And I'm not saying it's a good option, I'm just saying it's an option. District will cover health and welfare benefit costs, as in the past. I think that's another one that needs to be looked at.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
Just to correct a fallacy that I keep hearing, which is that with respect to impact on students regarding their full-time loads, so you're aware in September 2010, the Obamacare initial portions passed, which made mandatory insurance coverage for any child up to age 26, regardless of their full-time student status. So just to clarify, when I keep hearing about the impact on students and they'll lose their family health insurance, they won't.
What's the effective data that I kept hearing something that does not fully kick in until 2014 or something? Maybe I
there are portions of the Obamacare health plan that have not kicked in, but that's not one of them. That went into effect in September of 2010.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're okay on what I mentioned there. Total compensation model will be used to guide compensation costs. I think that's has to be true. Benefit plan upgrades will be discussed, and we're also working on containing the benefit costs, and we're working with, at the moment, Keenan to see if there are options that are available to where we can wring some of the money out of the system. So we're working on that as well. So benefit plan upgrades will be discussed. I think that's reasonable too. And yeah, Dave?
Yeah, we had a health committee, health and benefit committee. Is that still going to go on? I mean, this is where we tweaked the benefit plans before.
Okay, Ben?
I'm in the process and working with Grace in trying to resurrect this committee again. We just never got around to it yet. But this is something that relates to what Rick indicated, and I wanted to go back to the benefit plan upgrades. Maybe upgrade is not the word that needs to be there anymore. Maybe just benefit plan review based on...
benefit plan will be reviewed?
Yeah. And then going back, yes, there is a benefits committee that wasn't existing in the past and then got dormant, I guess, for a while, and I'm in the process of resurrecting that.
Yeah, because there was other things that were on that table of how, like going to a different carrier or whatever, instead of Keenan, maybe PERS or things like that to a trust fund to cut costs. and that was, pretty profitable last time we were looking at it, but it never went anywhere.
Right. I think down the road, that's what, this committee will get resurrected. I just don't know when yet. It's because of me, not because of,
Right,
I
but
just had
will it
other
be
things on the plate.
in time for for this budget?
I don't know, Dave. I don't have the answer to that for right now.
I can tell you, Dave, that we're working with Keenan now to have them do some brokering to see what available health plans, employee benefit plans are out there in relative terms of cost. Right now, we're on a super composite rate, which means that we pay the same price for each employee in the particular plan, regardless of how many dependents they have. The tier plans are much more expensive, but there are other carriers with different plans. Right now, it's looking like the plans we have are the most cost-effective as long as we stay on a super composite rate. And when Ben talks about review of the plans, the plan we have with its current deductibles, its current out-of-pocket, its current prescription rates, those are all part of a cost package that have to be looked at in total.
True, but we are paying Keenan a fee for doing that. Is that not correct?
Well, Keenan is our third-party administrator for not just our employee benefit plan, but for administration of SWAC and all of our insurance coverage.
Are you asking if there's an extra cost for them doing that? No. I think to go back to your question, I think I would be in a better position, and maybe Gail and Rick would be in a better position when we do resurrect this committee to have this information, rather than, because I think what you all had discussed way in the past before I know I got it, anybody else, it may not be not relevant, but it may not be the same data, or it may have changed. So I think to resurrect the committee without some information to provide, I think would not be productive. And so I think we collecting the information, then resurrect the committee may be more productive then. Does it make sense? Then?
Yeah.
Bob?
So do these discussions have to, are these discussions part of the collective bargaining discussions? In other words, can this group make decisions without going back and negotiating the impact of those decisions within the existing agreements?
No. To the extent that the health benefits, there are issues concerning benefits provided to retirees under the existing contract, and of course changing the health benefit structure is something that has to be discussed as part of a package.
Part of the package of the negotiations?
Correct.
So you'd have to go back to the table, talk about the changes to the health and welfare packages before you could put them into effect?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It's part of the compensation
so
package.
So that's just a timing issue that is important,
Well,
I think.
I think what you're asking, and to clarify, is, I think what you're asking is do we...
Yeah, we just can't snap our fingers and do it. It's got to be, the impact of it has got to be negotiated.
No, because benefits comes under the scope of representation.
Right, exactly.
Right. And
Okay.
there's some things that do not fall under the scope of representation. I think that's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
In any event, what this committee will do is to come up with recommendations for the Board of Trustees.
Got it. Exactly.
Okay. Continuing on in the Human Resources section. I think that that's still an exhaustive list, but if anybody has anything to add to that.
That first one, early retirement, will be considered during the budget development process. I don't know what that means based on what the president had indicated in his message about SERP will not be considered. Is that statement still appropriate?
Yeah. Well, certainly what he said was that the savings from SERP will not be used in order to balance the budget.
Right. So
And I believe currently the statement is there will be no Tier 4 of the SERP.
right. So is that statement still appropriate to even
Well,
consider?
we might have to tweak that one. And what we could say is that savings from SERP 3 will not be used to balance the budget. And the reason is because we're getting to the point where we have to replace people, and that's the reason why. You want to say something, Danny?
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems to me that the president said that's what he wanted, and I understand that, but there was never any discussion about that. There's no committee that discussed that. So I'm not ready to accept that as that's the parameters that we have to live under. I think we should discuss that.
Okay?
I mean, it was basically an edict given out by him. I don't know who else he discussed it with, maybe with the executive group. Was it discussed by anybody?
Obviously, he didn't dream it up in the middle of the night. So the answer is, what you're going to find, though, is that in terms of a guiding principle, we will adopt a guiding principle. The point is, and I think that it's somewhat beyond dispute, that we're getting to the point where certain parts of the organization will not be able to operate. So we have to replace people. We cannot continue to do amputations here. And, you know, if we were to leave the previous SERP alone and not replace anybody from that, okay, we're down 100 positions. How much lower do we go before we impact the entire operation of the organization? And I think that that's certainly a fair statement, that we have to replace people. We did replace 22 faculty members, but that's about it.
I'm not suggesting we don't replace people. But what I am saying is that, for instance, last year when we talked about the SERP, this whole idea that it is a one-time savings, and I repeatedly asked you to provide me with some information, what the basis was for it being a one-time. I don't understand. I guess my brain just doesn't work this way. But how you can replace, for instance, a faculty member or whoever that's making a lot more money with somebody who's making a lot less over the next 30 years, how it is just a one-time savings. And
well,
I still haven't been able to.
And I think that we provided the actuarial study on that showed all of that. Is that not true?
No, I don't believe so.
I think we did. The answer is there are also costs associated with SERP. Okay, so yes, you can take money out of the system. Now, it is true that if you don't replace anybody, then the reality is that the savings would continue forever. If you do replace, in our case, what it did is it lowered our base, okay, our base of expenditures. Now, what it did is we had to pay PARs, I think 1.2, 1.3 million? 1.4?
The fee is 4.75% of the annual.
But I think it turned into something like 1.3 million, give or take, that we owe for the next 5 years in order to cover the cost of the SERP.
Right, that's the payment to the, right, okay.
If we don't replace those people ever, then the base cost of operating is lowered by that amount. The trouble is, of course, our base revenues also drop permanently. And what we've managed to accomplish and how we've kicked the can down the road is we used the total savings from last year in order to cover this year's budget shortfall. Okay, therefore, that one is a neutral in terms of revenue and expenditure. Now, if we move forward with another one, the trouble is that we won't be able to replace anybody. We did not expect to have to use all of SERP last year to cover the budget cut, but we did. That's how we managed to balance the budget. So this year, what the President has said is, well, we have to replace people. You cannot kick the can down the road. We have to make structural changes. Now, what that means is that there are difficult decisions here for us to make, because this year, as I pointed out, is an $11 million problem, and next year's $6.5. Okay, so you add those two together, and that's $17.5 million off of a base last year of 120. Okay, so that's basically a 15% reduction in the course of a 2-year period.
Well, I don't follow everything that you said. I guess I'm just a little slow. But if you replace 22, for instance, you said we replaced 22 faculty last year. Most of those faculty were making well over 90,000, 100,000, right in that area. And those that you replaced them with are probably making somewhere in the area of 60, 70,000. That is an ongoing savings every year on our budget.
Every year they get a raise, however.
Right, I know.
Okay,
but
so those numbers start to coincide.
Well, yeah, over 30 years, but I'm not this year, not next year. I mean, they do a little bit each year, but I mean...
So the actuarial study shows how that can work. As soon as you start to replace people, then you start to chew up the amount of money that's left. Okay, so what we've done is we used all of the savings from SERP, with the exception of that $1 million, and we put it into how we reduce the ongoing expenditures of the district. We went past even what the actuarial study suggested.
Well, I know that's what you keep saying, but I still haven't seen it in numbers. And that's what I asked for all last year.
I think we actually, did we put that on the web or not?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, because I can probably put that.
Just
study
send me
on
in the
web.
direction of it, and I'll look at it. If it doesn't
Okay,
answer
all
my
right.
questions, I'll bring it up again.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
May I tell you something, if I may? In health sciences, here I go again, our lab technician quit. Our skills lab technician quit and moved away. And so what we have done, we have a few recent graduates who haven't found jobs yet, and they're actually working on transferring to the university and so forth. And so we have hired them as college assistants, or I'm not sure what their status is, but they don't make a whole lot of money. But we've been basically staffing our skills lab with our recent graduates, and they're doing a bang-up job and saving us, I guess they're saving us a lot of money in the process.
Okay.
What was, you started with a change of the language at the top, Rick. What were you
Yes.
going to say?
Well, and what I suggested is savings from SERP 3 will not be used to balance the budget. And Ed, you want to say something?
Is that the one for the early retirement? Are we
SERP
on that
3
one?
is the third phase of early retirement.
Step 3, that's a June 30th one.
A question about that, the last category of human resources of hiring faculty.
And I don't mean to come up here and sound like I'm against hiring faculty. That's not what I'm doing. But how critical is it that we replace or that we hire the faculty that we have advocated doing so at this point? In other words, how does this relate to our legal obligation to have a certain number of full-time faculty?
To have a frost as opposed to a freeze?
Yes, also.
I think he's
Well,
talking about the
not just,
FFON.
but
The full-time
He's talking about
faculty
the
obligation
FOA.
number?
Right.
And, you know, I don't know what that calculation shows. Do you?
I do. And per the calculation, which is quite a calculation required by the Chancellor's Office, we have a fiduciary responsibility to have 378 full-time faculty at PCC based upon our current FTES. That number would go down following year if we get a reduction. In order to achieve 378, we have to hire 10 new faculty. However, the district has an option, which is to incur a fine of, I believe the last number I heard was roughly $65,000 per faculty member if we do not hire those folks. Now, for years, and I say years, at least the last 3 or 4, every district has expected the Board of Governors to waive that requirement, but they have not done so. And I think that's based upon academic senate, statewide academic senate, and other concerns that that we want to maintain. That the state wants to maintain a solid pool of full-time faculty at all their campuses.
So we are indeed under a legal obligation to hire those 10
We are under
faculty.
a statutory obligation. I turn to counsel and see if that's legal or not, but we are under some requirement by the Chancellor's Office to maintain a full-time faculty obligation number of 378, of which we are now currently 10 below that. So the hiring fair, whatever they call it.
Yeah, and that's what he's talking about. That's why we're having a job fair tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, actually tomorrow.
Right. So perhaps this wording should be changed to reflect something about having to meet our legal obligations with regards to.
Well, and I think that the idea to say frost is that it does not mean a freeze, that we have the ability to hire people, but it's going to be on a highly restricted basis.
And I would agree. I just want to comment that it's not just faculty we absolutely necessarily need. I mean, as Rick said, custodians, you know, my area needs researchers, Dwayne's area needs some web staff. I mean, there are some people that we, quote unquote, whether we serve 25,000 students or 30,000 students, we need staff to do it in certain key areas.
Right. Dave?
Yeah, but that, for custodians and webcasters, that's not a requirement by the state, is that correct?
No, it's not,
Because that's, I believe the teachers are 75-25?
Yeah, as far as I know, there's no requirements beyond the teaching, but we have an obligation, again, from an academic integrity, quality, health violations, everything else that we do around here, we've got to do what we need to do.
You're not arguing to not hire custodians, are you, Dave?
Well, no, I'm not arguing. I just didn't want anybody to have the misconception that the state requires that we have so many people on custodial staff.
Right.
Because I know there is teachers, it's. Like
Or
I
even
said,
electricians.
Or electricians, whatever.
Well, my experience has been that some institutions, given the union contracts, that square footage increases and adjustments has an impact on the number of custodial staff and number of campus police and other types of services like that. I don't know if ours are covered like that, but that would be the only obligation that I would understand that we'd have. We certainly don't have that on the website of the house. We don't have to hire the staff. We would have to go out and hire a consulting organization to do it for us, but.
Okay, let's continue, and we're going to come back to this every single meeting, by the way, that we'll continue to adapt this. So next time I'll have another one and another iteration and so forth. On the instructional side, does anybody have, some of these numbers obviously are going to change and fairly much by the day they change now, for instance, with the FTS. Lottery revenue will be budgeted at the rate recommended. District will provide grant matches, fee-based extension courses. I assume that on the instruction end, everybody's okay with that? And as you take these away and think of something else, then bring it to the next meeting. Okay, on the miscellaneous, increased cost effectiveness, restructuring, that's an ongoing process. College-wide class scheduling room assignments, 25 Live. When is 25 Live going to go live?
You would ask.
Yeah, exactly. I'm told fall of 12.
So it'll be
this coming
used
fall.
Then.
Hmm?
We're going to test it this.
Yeah, they're testing it right now. They're working on it right now between the technology and other things. But fall 12 is when it's going to go live.
Okay.
It's actually being used a little bit right now and what have you, but it's.
All right.
Can we go back to instruction for a
Yes.
minute, please? You know, low-enrolled class sections will be canceled prior to start of the semester, et cetera. Now, I know there are people looking at this, but it would seem to me that a group of people from multiple disciplines should get together in a room and have a big chart that says, this is every course that the students are required to complete to transfer to the four-year institution, associate degrees awarded will be increased, the STEM certificates, and then look at, okay, what are the commonalities? What class, what history or government class will meet the requirement for the most people, or what have you? And offer the section, if that's our goal for them to get certificates and to transfer and to get associate degrees, then let's offer the courses that meet that and let's cancel the courses that don't. It seems kind of simple and smart and
Ed
sensible.
just needs to stand at the lectern, I think. You're just dying to say something. Please.
Unfortunately, it's not that simple. But it is something that we are trying to address through the Enrollment Management Committee and to change our current policy and procedures, actually to provide more guidance to the deans and other administrators about how to prioritize the retention of class sections or how to reduce those that perhaps can be cut. Okay,
And
that's a good thought, but we need to find a way to implement it systematically and fairly.
And we have a meeting this coming Monday at 12:30 to continue our discussions along those lines of the Enrollment Management Committee, and everybody's invited to attend.
Okay, you know, as an example, here I go nursing again. You know, for the anatomy and physiology, there's a chemistry prerequisite, and I spoke to Dave Douglas the other day just to verify this, that chemistry 2A is the one that will transfer to Cal State LA, Cal State Northridge, and it meets half the requirement at Long Beach. The other ones that are options do not meet that requirement. So my question is, why offer that? Why give that an option? That just confuses the students. They take the wrong chemistry, they go to the university, they have to repeat it. It seems if 2A meets the prerequisite for the science courses that almost all the health science division students take and is transferable to the university, that's the chemistry that should be offered, I think.
So you're working with that, Bob?
Yes, we are. The Enrollment Management Committee. And Tom, I'd invite you to come to the committee and say...
That's in here?
Things. Beg pardon? You're going to have better technology to manage this stuff. And You know, as we look at options going forward, in terms of how we build our schedules, you know, like for example, in a summer intercession, could we do everything where we schedule Monday through Thursday and literally shut the campus down Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? We could begin to do things like that. If we're going to have a dramatically reduced summer session, which it looks like we will this summer, and let's say we only have 100 to 150 sections, can we put all of those in one building or two buildings and literally shut down the other buildings from a utilities point of view or whatever? Yeah, the answer is yes, and we can wring some efficiencies out of that. And there's no reason why this summer we can't do that if we're going to only mount a schedule of 100 to 150 sections, whether to put them all in the C building or the R building or wherever you want to put them.
Okay. Under miscellaneous, LA County election expenses for 2011 will be budgeted. Okay, now, one of the things that we have done forever is that we budget each year for a biannual election. So what happens is that we budget a constant amount, which I think is about $250,000 per year. This past year, in the current budget year, but in November, we had an election, and I don't, have we seen the bill for that yet from the county? I don't think we've seen that one yet. But it's likely to be in the $400,000 or $500,000 neighborhood. And basically, we just get an invoice, and then that's what we get to pay. So Dr. Kostler always used to budget this every single year and then set the money aside in the alternate years. So you budget basically $250,000 per year, as opposed to $0, $500,000, $0, $500,000. Because, of course, when you're budgeting the way that we do, that has kind of an impact on what you do from one year to the next. So it is one of the issues that we will have to deal with for the 2013 election for the Board of Trustees. This, of course, does not cover the actual campaigning and stuff. This is just the bill that we get from the county to run the election.
Sounds like a maintenance cost to me that just needs to be budgeted.
And it kind of is.
Yeah.
But it's one of the principles. We changed the number from 2011 to 2013, but that's another one, and we don't have to decide that today. Okay. So in general, what we'll do is we'll have another crack at this, and then we'll distribute the new version next time. Is that all right? Okay. Let me just, if we can quickly deal with the Institutional Effectiveness Committee and how you're going through the program review and whatnot, because that does have an impact on the budget as well.
I'll speak briefly to this, and perhaps Ed might want to make a comment, or Dustin a comment as well. Under the auspices of the Academic Senate, we have an Institutional Effectiveness Committee. Cynthia Levo, Dean Levo, is here. She is one of the co-chairs, along with Sheila Rose, who's the faculty co-chair of that committee. And they have been engaged in very, very heavy lifting and very, very hard work now for over a year. And their purpose is to review the program reviews as are submitted to them by the faculty through the divisions and up to the IEC. And then from an accreditation point of view, or from a continuous cycle of improvement point of view, the idea is that they look at those program reviews, they assess those program reviews, they provide information and comments back to the faculty and others that are bringing those forth, and those faculty then begin to make improvements based upon the recommendations that are provided. The district has something called a program discontinuance policy, and at some point the IEC will likely bring thoughts forward through the Academic Senate that maybe certain programs do or should be considered for discontinuance, and at that point would be when that program discontinuance policy would kick in. Ed or Dustin, or Cynthia, have I given this enough justice?
Well, let me just say that over the past year, we have done a lot to encourage this sense of, sacred peer review, everyone providing feedback to faculty and to programs for the sake of becoming more effective for students. We have not talked about program discontinuance. Right. We do know that the Academic Senate is wanting to review the program discontinuance policy, and that the IEC might play a role in that.
Right.
Okay, because that is one of the issues that at a certain point we're going to have to wrestle with the idea that we can't be everything to everybody.
Right.
And then you end up having to prioritize what we really do. And you know, there aren't going to be too many simple decisions as a result of what we're about to go through in the next few weeks with this committee. Now, one of the things that we are going to have to, did you want to say something, Tom?
Well, just, I know that there are programs that have run with 3 students and a full-time teacher. When I was on the Academic Senate, Ellen Liggins did a report about numbers of certificates that were awarded in various programs. Some awarded no certificates. And to the best of my knowledge, those things continue. It seems that we have heard that this is a problem for years, but nobody seems to have the will to make the tough decision and say, we don't have any money, we have to cut this. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm skeptical that it will actually happen, because I think it's painful and unpleasant and nobody is willing to do it.
I think that we're going to find that all of our decisions are going to be painful and unpleasant. That's just a given of what we're about to go through. You know, the key point right now is that it is not business as usual, and the way that we've done it in the past will not be the way that we do it in the future. That's just a given. You can't cut the amount of money that we're about to cut without having any impact.
Yeah, I mean, within my own division, we ran a program with 4 students and paid a full-time teacher the whole year. It's a 12-month program, full-time, summer and everything, for 4 students.
Right.
It doesn't seem, you know, it's great for those students, but it doesn't seem like it's fiscally sound.
I agree with you completely. Dave?
Yeah, well, we're going to have it on here about, like for the summer for 410, and then close the college down to not only classes for Saturday and Sunday, but civil service or civil events.
Civic Center?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the options that needs to be on the table. You know, everything's on the table.
Right. But will it be on here on the table for discussion?
For an option, yes, absolutely. So what we now need to talk about is we have a $2.85 million gap that we need to bridge for the current year. And we need to start talking now about what we're going to do in order to bridge that gap. So, you know, there are several ways of doing this. The most unfair way is to do across-the-board budget cut, because, you know, portions of the organization that are running very efficiently would be punished disproportionately to the ones that are running inefficiently. So I don't think it's fair to say, okay, let's do across-the-board cut. But $2.85 million at this point is not easy to come by. So we did set aside $1 million for hiring new people, and it's entirely possible that we could take $750,000 of that. And then, because by the time that we hire people, it's likely to be May, and we might only need 2 months. And that's only going to be for critical positions. But, you know, so one of the options is to nip out $750,000. Okay, now if we were to do, and what we'll end up doing is that we'll keep a tally on how much money we can come up with, and then we'll, you know, have some kind of a chart or something of where we are in order to get up to the full 2.85. But people need to start, you know, thinking of a way of finding that money. Dustin?
I just have a question of clarification. Are the 10 faculty members still going to be hired that were ranked by a committee earlier this semester, or is that frozen?
Well, I have to.
No, well, that would be for the coming year in any event. So that's a 12-13 issue, and the answer is that if the FON, the full-time obligation number is that we need to hire 10 or pay the fine, then you hire the 10 and you don't pay the fine.
Thank you.
Or it's suspended. So I think that's one of the things that we need to develop for the 12-13 budget. For the 11-12 budget, we need the 2.85, and that's not a part of the deal. Dave?
Yeah, is there any way we can get a copy of what consultants are on staff right now and contracts and so forth, and how much that they're committed to them?
Yeah, that's easy to come by. That'd be on the, right now, if somebody's got a computer, you can look it up on the budget. Because what's the object code for consultants, Murray?
5,000 object codes.
What is it?
All 5,000?
All the 5,000.
All the 5,000.
Majority of the 5,000. 51 is on the 5,000 object, the first half, not the 5820. But some are also on the 5820 when it's only one time.
So the majority of the 5,000 bank. So if you see all, and there's a line in the budget that says total for 5,000, that's going to be the number.
Yeah, but is that all of them, or are they broken down into?
It'll show which departments have them, because then it'll break down into cost
Not
centers.
necessarily the consultants themselves, correct?
That's correct.
And then you've got to differentiate Fund 1 from Fund 3.
Okay.
Because some of these are Fund 3s, right?
Fund 3 consultants are not an issue here, because, Fund 3, we're not going to touch.
And Fund 3 is soft money, that's the grant money that comes in, so it's not district money.
Right. That would not look, because we're not going to obviously get rid of the grant.
Right. And yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I think the entire executive committee is here, right?
Over Mark.
Who? Except for Mark.
Except for Mark. Yeah.
So the entire operation of the institution in terms of executives is here, and it's going to come down to what money can we find in our budgets in order to cover 2.85.
One of the things that I think we might ought to do, I liked our recommendations from our colleague from the nursing area with respect to maybe some brainstorming. It would be nice somehow if we could find a way to elicit ideas from across the institution, maybe set up something where we leverage the web to at least start getting ideas across the campus and at least let those filter in and become part of this strategy. I do think everything needs to be on the table, and we'll certainly look very critically, but I really like being able to hear the ideas, and that idea spawn a different idea, and so I think there's synergy that comes from that. And plus, I think on an institutional level, if the college as a whole really had an opportunity to have that input, at least they have now had an opportunity to say what they want. And we take those ideas, and as a group, we can actually take a very serious look at that, because we do have two pieces of this equation. We got to deal with some stuff now. Some of those recommendations might actually quite easily apply now, but also into the future. So, and some may be only now. So those are the kind of things we ought to maybe consider as we go forward.
Rick, that 2.8 you're talking about, what's the drop date? This may be a stupid question, but what is the drop dead date we need to come up with the...
June the 30th?
June 30th.
But the deal is, what will happen is we're just not going to get that money.
Right.
Okay, so in effect, what occurs is the state shorts us even more in our apportionment.
So for our decision, though, that's what I'm talking about.
No, well, we have until June the 30th,
June
but the
30th.
reality is, if you have June the 30th, you have no time to do it.
We're trying to identify $2.8 million to save out of the budget between today and June 30th.
Right, but
and
the drop
actually
dead
save
date
that
is-
money.
We actually have to save it in this budget year.
Exactly.
So the drop dead date is June the 30th, but the reality is that we have to come up with whatever we need to come up with as quickly as possible.
That's what I was trying to ask. I didn't ask it well, but so what is the preferred date we should come up with?
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
3 o'clock?
Or 3
Tonight.
o'clock this afternoon.
Tonight at 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we go back to Dwayne's point, because it was a good one. I think what Dwayne was saying is if we can figure out a way to put out a call, maybe over the Pulse or maybe through a web page or something that basically says, it's a employee Dropbox for ideas for saving money.
Well, or students.
Or students, basically, and then collecting all that and then taking a look at it, because I think you're right. There might be some good ideas. And
what does it take to set that up, Dwayne?
I don't know. I was going to go back and sit down with a few people and discuss how quickly that could be set up.
Budget saving suggestion box,
You're
electronic
not going to crush
suggestion.
our system, right? Because everybody going to jump on it.
Well, but what would be helpful is because what you mentioned is brainstorming, one idea, even a bad one, can lead to a really good one.
Exactly.
So if everybody can see that, if there's some way for everybody to be able to contribute to an ongoing discussion.
Yes, I think I like the idea of categories, in that because some folks may have some certain good ideas in areas. For instance, there may be some things I might work in instruction, but not a lot. I think the real beneficial ideas will come from faculty and those that work in those respective areas. But then have the entire list as a very running public list. You may even get input from the community.
Right.
And so let us look at a quick way that we could do that.
And then should that be anonymous, or should that be required that you know who it comes from?
Well,
I think it should be anonymous.
I think
people might be really willing to put it out there,
Yeah.
Even though their colleagues might disagree, if they don't have to be identified.
I agree, and there are certain ways that would need to be handled. But the other aspect of that, too, is that they can certainly make it optional, in that there may be questions that come out of a particular idea that we don't really understand the way it was said or way it was explained, so that someone could actually follow up and say, okay, if I could understand more clearly what you're saying and why you're saying it, that might be helpful for the committee to look at those ideas. But at least you make it optional if they choose to say that.
I think it might also be helpful to let them identify their category of employment or their area in a broad general term.
Student,
custodian, faculty, student, what have you, so we'll know where the idea is coming from.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? All right.
I think we also might want to add on, because we keep asking for suggestions for people to cut. We also might want to ask for ways we can generate some revenue, because we can only make so many cuts. If we limit it to just cuts, that's all we're going to get, seems like.
Mm-hmm. Two sides of the equation.
Our next meeting is Friday.
Well, and we need to talk about that, because I think we're going to have to do it in 2 weeks from now because of a previous commitment that I have. But if it's possible, well, let's just talk about the schedule. Last year, we met from 1 to 3, and I think we met twice a month or every other week.
Approximately.
Okay, so the question that we have right now is, for everybody's, and I know that Tom has issues with scheduling and did before, in terms of what the preference is for Fridays, and we are going to meet every Friday until we resolve the issue, with the exception, like I said, of next Friday, but then thereafter, every Friday, and I think we have one other week, which is Spring Break Friday, and we're going to be closed apparently during the entire spring break anyway. We have another one?
Cesar Chavez on March 30th.
March the 30th, we go dark as well.
Yes.
And commencement.
And commencement Friday.
June 15th.
And we need to talk about when we're going to come up with this plan too. Does anybody have any preference in terms of time? Is 12 o'clock better, is 1 o'clock better, or?
12 is always good as long as lunch is here.
Thank you for
That's why, I think that's why last year we did 1 o'clock.
No, but the earlier, 12, I prefer 12. I got to go back through traffic, so start
I would
earlier,
prefer
I can
12
leave
as well.
earlier.
I think anybody would be welcome to bring their lunch with them if they need to eat it.
Yeah.
If you don't mind the microphone being covered in food.
But I'll bring enough
No,
for
Rick,
two.
we're here at 6.
You and me.
That's true. I get here at 6.
Get
Let's
a
do it
breakfast
then.
meeting.
People would prefer 12 o'clock? Is there anybody who would prefer not 12 o'clock, other than me?
I prefer 1, but maybe we could compromise on 12:30.
So that there's some time for lunch? Is that, if we did, and hopefully we can restrict it to 2 hours, so if it's instead of 3, because I think what we said was 12 to 3.
Right.
I just wanted to point out that the Institutional Effectiveness Committee, which has faculty, it's a shared governance group, we meet Fridays from 12:30 to 3:30, and faculty members' teaching assignments were, designed around that. So I don't know that we could change. if somebody here could keep us posted on the dialogue at the Resource Allocation Committee so that we are still able to find out what's happening here.
How often does that committee meet?
We meet every Friday, 12:30
So you guys met today?
We start next Friday.
Oh, next Friday.
After the first week.
Where
of
do you
classes.
meet?
They used to meet here.
Yeah, but
Oh, you guys gonna meet
we don't
there?
mind meeting in the president's conference room. We wanted to meet there, but you all met there, so.
Okay. So is 12:30 to 2:30 acceptable as a compromise?
Yeah.
Yes? Yes?
Fine. Yes.
Any objection? Okay, so 12:30 to 2:30. And then let's talk about our schedule, because we do need to come up with a schedule that will bring in two things. One is the current year $2.85 million, and the second is, I think that what we need to do is come up with at least the basic structure of the budget by July the 1st. We have no control over when the state actually enacts the budget. We typically, if they enact it on time, before July the 1st, we find out what the impacts are to PCC about the second or third week of August, is when it's all been digested, the chancellor's office has done their thing, then they have a meeting where they hand out budget books to everybody. Okay, so necessarily it continues on into August. Statutorily, by September the 15th, the budget must be adopted by the Board of Trustees. What that means is that we have a rollover budget, an interim budget that is established and passed by the board by July the 1st. Otherwise, we have no legal authority to spend any money. So we will come up with basically a pro forma budget where we just change the numbers from 11-12 to 12-13, take the current year budget, put it before the Board of Trustees, and have them adopted as a temporary budget. So what we're going to do is we need to work backward, and this is going to be a rather extensive process, from July the 1st to get the basic structure in place. It means that every week we're going to have to address some issue of some significance and make some kind of decision moving forward. And if people have ideas as to what they'd like to address first, we also, of course, have to dovetail in with the other committees, the Enrollment Management Committee, institutional effectiveness for program review and all that stuff. So exactly what the mechanism is to feed into this and how quickly the other committees are going to come to resolution or recommendation, I'm not sure how to do that. Do you have an idea, Bob, with institutional effectiveness for program review and how that can be fed into this? Part of the accreditation requirement is that the planning process be tied and linked closely with the budget group. So we've got to get that feedback in here.
The issue, of course, is the planning discontinuance policy, Ed, and we've talked about this because it's. You want to try to address that a little bit, or maybe you don't. But the point is that you didn't jump out of your chair too quickly. But the point is that this institution, like many colleges, has never fast-tracked the discontinuance of any program. Now, we are in a financial crisis, and therefore, as you've stated before, Rick, we may have to make some quick decisions, as Tom has pointed out an example, for example. But we don't really have the shared governance mechanism to do that at the moment.
Right. I don't see how, I'm not sure how any of this, frankly, would be done quickly. But in the normal course of business, my understanding is that your recommendations would go then to the appropriate other body. Say, for example, the Curriculum Instruction Committee or Enrollment Management or one of the other bodies. And then it would go work its way through the normal shared governance process.
Because what we're really discussing here is a possibility of suspending certain district policy on the basis of a financial crisis and making decisions as a result of that financial exigency, crisis, whatever word you want to use. That's our challenge. We're caught between we're caught between the budget reality and the shared governance realities and the district policy and how we move forward as a result of that.
Right, but I would say, frankly, it seems to me that it all depends on what the particular recommendations might be. I mean, again, whether there's something that really does need the input of, say, again, the CNI committee, or again, whatever the particular recommendations might entail.
Right, and of course we have faculty who are impacted by these decisions, and load issues and all kinds of issues that we have to bear in mind as we make these decisions.
Right.
So one of the things, Anthony, I might ask is, can we identify how much money is not being spent on wages, salaries, and benefits? So people who resigned over the course of the year, where there was budget in place and we haven't replaced them. Ultimately, I think that the bulk of the number is going to come out of wages and salaries. And I suppose the benefit portion, to the extent that, you know, because that'll run somewhere around 25% or so of salary cost. But if we can identify open positions, if we were to take all the 1 and 2 and 3,000s and add them together, is there a way of seeing any amount of money that might be left over?
Yeah, we should be able to measure our vacancy.
Because typically, you know, when you talk about sweeping the budget at the end of the year, that's typically an area, and unfortunately our budget system is anything but what you need to run a budget on a dynamic basis. We don't have the ability to see where we are in the middle of the year and where we're going to end up. And we don't have benchmarks along the way to be able to track. If we were to be able to budget by the month, for example, we could keep monthly scorecard to see if we're above or below budget. What happens is the time between adoption of the budget and the close of the fiscal year is just a big black box. And if we could come up with any estimate at all of where we might be, that's an area that seems the most promising.
Yeah, we should come up with that.
The new AIS has online budgeting.
Yes. It's just recurring.
Well, and every
theme.
time
It
we
just
come
keeps
back to
coming
the
up.
same problem, because people wonder how we get to the end of the year and can be surprised. And as Marie can attest, the numbers start swinging rather wildly in the middle of July. And from one day to the next, you can move by $2 million because of the closeouts that have to occur and the postings that have to be done. So as they go through the individual components of the budget and the financial statements and start closing things down, it's like, wow, that one was over, that one was under. And we don't even know before the year ends how we're going to end up. And in fact, and this is every year that I've been here, come about the third week of July, you really don't want to ask from one day to the next because the numbers are swinging around so badly. Is that not true?
It's true.
But it's also true that we traditionally over-project or under-project what our revenues are going to be and over-project what our expenditures are going to be.
The over-projection of expenditures usually occurs with positions, to where people retire, resign, transfer, whatever they do during the course of the year. 90% of the budget is that, and therefore those are swings that aren't anticipated during the course of the year. The unfortunate part of the revenue projections is we don't make up any of those numbers. They're given to us. And this year, you have no idea how it's going to be. Property taxes this year, we've already been told, are going to be $49 million lower. Okay, well, that means that that's $1 million to us, and that's a chunk of our budget. Okay, those numbers are projections that were given by either the Department of Finance or the Chancellor's Office, and those are the numbers that we use. And they don't have any control over them either.
But, I mean, over the last 8 to 10 years here, if you take the over-projection of expenditures and under-projections of revenues, which ends up being the sweep at the end of the year.
Correct.
For instance, since 2007, our reserves have gone from $14.5 million to almost $19 million. That's $4.5 million. The President's letter said we've used up all our savings. We've added $4.5 million into our reserves.
No,
okay?
but I think to be clear, what we're talking about is that there's a distinction to be made between reserves and ending balance. we're using the amount of money that we have in order to actually make our payroll and so forth. So what he's talking about is we expect the ending balance, if we were to close the books June the 30th on a cash basis, we would have $4 million worth of assets for the ending balance. That means receivables and cash. A bunch of that is receivable and not cash. Is it normally about a third is receivable?
About. Last year it was like 19 million.
Yeah. And the receivables were about 6 or so?
Oh, 90, because of the state deferral alone, it was
well, that's
19
true.
million.
We ended the year with $19 million in receivables because we didn't have that money until the state made us whole, and then the receivable came in form of cash. It is you have to remember that our budget is set based on a fiscal year. That's the one side. That's the operational budget. The other side of it that we never pay much attention to is the cash basis. That we have to actually have cash in order to pay our bills. Okay, now the answer is, thankfully, over the course of the years, we've been able to put additional money into our ending balance, because otherwise this problem would be even worse. 3 years ago, we did a tax and revenue anticipation note, which is we borrowed $10 million because we weren't expecting to be able to make the payroll. As it turns out, and that cost us, I think, almost $200,000. I think it was $180,000. Okay, last year we decided not to do that because we'll borrow from ourselves. And we're going to see if we can continue to do that to where we'll just borrow money from ourselves and from the other funds.
But I asked last year in this committee whether we had ever borrowed intra-funds within our own college last year, and the answer was no.
That's correct.
So we didn't borrow from any other funds. The President's letter said we've borrowed from other funds that we'd borrowed from externally, and the $10 million we borrowed 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we didn't actually need. We didn't end up needing. I'm not questioning the decision to do it, but we didn't actually need to borrow that money because we didn't need it. We didn't use it. Is that correct?
That's true.
Okay, so, statements are made and the impression is left that we're borrowing money left and right from inter-funds and we can't keep doing that. The President's letter said we haven't lived within our expenses since 2007. But it's I've looked at the 311Qs, which are the official numbers, and we have $4.5 million more in reserves than we did in 2007 on June 30th.
And what you have to be careful is when you're looking at the 311Qs, there are 4 of those in a year. Okay, and what you'll see is that during the course of the year, those numbers are pretty dramatically different. So when you get toward the third quarter and the fourth quarter, you'll see that the amount of money that is in reserve diminishes pretty dramatically. Then the fourth quarter, the 311Q for the fourth quarter, comes out after the year has been closed out. Okay, what's missing from there is the texture that occurs between. If you're going to start tracking the cash on a per-day basis, you will see that alarm bells start going off. Okay, so yes, for the last few years we have asked for and received board authorization to borrow the money because we do have an expectation of that. Now, as it happens, the situation is very fluid. So last year, the state paid us quicker in July than they promised that they would. They had more money in July. We got more money. Okay, July is the real problem because July starts off with the state having borrowed its maximum money from us and the budget not having been yet enacted and our budget not being in place, we don't get money from the state as quickly. So therefore, the July payroll is where the problem typically comes. So yes, we do expect to set up, and every year we expect to receive board authorization to do interfund transfers.
Right, you get the authorization, but we've never actually borrowed.
No, thankfully, and that's part of the reason is because the projections at the end of the year, we actually have money left over. And I've told you this before, is that we have never actually planned on doing a sweep at the end of the year. The way that the numbers pencil out is pretty tight. Then at the end of the year, for the reasons I mentioned, is that we thankfully have money left over that helps us out for the following year. So last year we had we went from about 19 million to this year's expectations 22 million of interest-free borrowing by the state. They just withhold our money. Okay, well that means $3 million more. We have a reputation that we pay our bills on time. both to the employees and to our vendors and contractors. And it's important to actually manage our cash properly.
Right, but I realize the cash flow thing is one thing, but the amount of money and living within our expenditures is another thing. And so my point, if the money's deferred, you're eventually going to get it, and if you need to borrow in order to pay something, you can. I'm not suggesting that we do that. I'm not, listen, it's not in my best interest or any of the faculty's best interest for this institution to be in financial trouble. I mean, this, you know, so it's not like I have a vested interest in us to do well here. So, but my point is that the idea that we've used up our savings when we've actually added $4.5 million to our savings over the last 4 or 5 years is one thing. And I understand there's fluctuations throughout the year. I'm not arguing with that. But, and again, I'd have to look back historically, but even this year, our expenditures as of December 31st, so halfway into the year, we're at 41.5% of expenditures. That's $9.6 million under what we expected to expend by then.
The trick, though, Danny, is you need to remember that for financial purposes, there are 13 months in the year, okay, because you really do have July as a part of June. Okay, so when you're doing accrual-based accounting, you end up having to attribute the expenses that occur, and the way that the books are closed out, there are a lot of swings that occur in the month of July. So it is not accurate to say that December 31st is halfway through the year.
Okay. My point is, though, again, over the last 5 years, the average between money put into reserves and money swept into other accounts because we either received more revenues than projected or expended less than expected has been between $5 and $6 million every year on average over the last 5 years throughout this whole entire crisis. Is that not true?
Could be.
Okay. So my point is that I think we need to look at that, and we need to maybe look at the budget, and let's, like for instance, last year when we needed to move out of the U building, we found $6.2 million in about
thankfully
3 days. That was money sitting in some account in the budget for things that wasn't necessary. So I think one of the things we should do is have the budget out here and let's go through and explain how come there's $2 million in this account. Why is there $5 million in this account? Why is there $100,000 in this account? Just so we understand. I'm not suggesting, I mean, we went through and we found $6.2 million last time, so maybe we can find a couple more million to get us through this year for now.
Okay, and those are one-time monies.
Well, whether they're one-time or not, this is
no, this is an ongoing. This is a structural cut. This will continue into next year. We will not have more money next year. The issue is that it is true that we have almost $8 million in our AIS fund. That's true. Thankfully, we had enough money to move people out of the U building. And yes, that occurred through reprioritization. There's no secret fund. That was in the capital outlay fund.
I didn't say it was a secret fund. They had $3.1 million for a building that, I mean, it was $3.1 million sitting in there for some warehouse that we were going to build someday.
That's true.
I mean, those are the kinds of
things. And we reprioritized.
Okay. So, but those are the kinds of things. Maybe we should look through the budget and see if we need to reprioritize some other things.
Okay. And when you reprioritize, you can't take one-time money for an ongoing expense. It has to be within the context of Fund 1. So what I just said is that, for instance, with the, are there open positions that are funded to where we can take that money? That would be one of the sources of money to sweep at the end of the year. So if we can do that now, that's how you avoid a more draconian cut. That's precisely what we're talking about doing. Now, for next year, it will be far more difficult. Now, let me also point out one other thing is that in terms of not living within our means, you're talking about a cap. Okay, so what we always do is we end up shooting over cap. That's not living within our means. Okay, so when Dr. Roach is talking about living within our means, I think that our high was something like 1,700 over cap. Is that not true, Bob, during Dr. Perfumo's time?
1,500.
The answer is it was higher than that.
Was it?
Yeah, yes, it was.
Okay, so I think that now one year when Dr. Kostler was here, I think we were off by something like 2 students or something like that?
Well, normally, in the good old days, it was considered healthy to operate 2 to 4% over your FTES. But at one point, well, for example, this year we're going to end at just under 1,000 over our allocated FTS, which is 19,000. So we're 8 or 9%. So we are absolutely over. But 1,800, I think we almost approached 2,000 at one point. Frankly, we lost control of it in a big way in in recent years.
So the deal is that you actually have to live within your revenue stream. And I think that was what the point that was being made. Okay, and I know that we're almost running out of, Dave?
Yeah, did I hear you say about taking money from salaries and sweeping it, correct? But that position still stays on the books.
Yes.
That's correct?
Typically that's true. What we did this last year is we unfunded a whole series of positions. I think there are 127 unfunded positions that are on the books still. They appear in Cost Center 3001.
Get a clarification what you just asked, Dave. When you say on the books, are you saying it has to remain on the book?
Correct, because that's a union issue, if I'm not mistaken, in order for you to delete a position from the chapters or from a organization.
That's a different discussion.
But in any event, that becomes a somewhat academic discussion because the position can be there as unfunded.
True, but it could be funded in future years.
Could be funded in the future, and that's why they're all listed in one cost center now. But what we can do is we can move vacant positions that currently exist into the same cost center and then reprioritize and hire as is absolutely required. Ultimately, it does come down to people. Now, there's one other source, too, that we might want to check, and there's $19 million for, altogether, I believe, for adjunct faculty.
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah.
And the question is, how is that money tracking now? What happens is that the money is set aside in lump sum, and then it's distributed by fiscal each month to cover costs. So the question is there a way of tracking that money to see how we're doing on the $19 million?
Sure, we can just do our look.
Because if we're tracking under that amount of money, and if we can project that to June the 30th, that might be another source of tightening up.
And that's all adjunct, credit, non-credit, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Is the
Fund 1.
Is that an annual amount, $19 million?
Well, it changes from one year to the next, but
okay.
yes.
Okay.
I think at one point it was 21, but...
And where is that from? What is that mean?
What do you mean, where's it from?
It's in the Office of Instruction, I believe.
Yeah, it's going to be Cost Center 1,000.
Okay, and then one other question. There was $500,000 set aside for revenue enhancement. And how are we doing on that? Where are we doing? Have we developed anything that is increasing the revenues at this point, or could by July 1st of next year?
Well, we've done a pretty good job, thanks to our student services folks, Ted Young, several language faculty, a variety of people. Anyway, we've increased our F1 visa by a relatively significant amount of money, several $100,000. Actually, we brought additional revenue in. We've had at least one contract education deal we put together with a revenue of about $260,000 this year. We are pursuing other things along those lines.
How much was that previous one?
$260,000 for a contract education deal. Now that has expenses against it, but
yeah,
that's the income. And we are even in the area of online, we've been able to realize some additional efficiencies, which are hard to quantify right now, but we're making some progress in that way. And then on grants, we've actually had a pretty good year with grants. For example, we brought in an HSI, a Hispanic Serving Institution, STEM grant, roughly $6 million over 5 years, of which we get about $5 million of that over 5 years. The other $1 million goes out to Cal Poly.
Does any of that offset 01 fund?
And much of that offsets 01 fund. As everyone knows, we get a lot of additional staffing through grant-funded positions.
So would it be true to say that because of the 03 fund, 01 funds are freed up?
It would be appropriate in some respects to say they're freed up for other things. That's absolutely correct.
Okay, and is it freed up for the potential of a mid-year budget cut?
I mean, for this year? It would be hard to say because in order to do that, you'd have to lay somebody off, I think, or shift somebody into the grant funding.
Okay,
or instead of hiring somebody, that we could
outsource,
hire somebody,
right? Yeah, in fact,
grant funded to fill certain roles.
And we were just talking about that this morning, actually. Yeah. So yeah, definitely there are ways to do that. Yeah.
So can we explore if there's a way of leveraging the grant money to help the 01?
We can. We have to wring it out of the cold, hard hands of the people who wrote the grant, but we can do that.
It's going to be wrung out of their cold, hard hands anyway, isn't it?
Exactly right. No. You can do it, but yeah.
What else can we look at in the next 2 weeks to come back and have a meaningful discussion about where we actually come up with 2.8?
Well, I think if we can get that website thing going.
I was just going to say, yeah. I will come back. Whatever our next meeting is, we will have a working prototype, and we will.
Or if you can just start it up.
And
yeah, just start
I don't think you need to wait for us.
Just do
I think
it.
that we all think it's a good idea.
And then if nothing else,
where's that big red button?
Yeah. And nothing else, we can have a couple of whiteboards in here and just do a brainstorming session.
Well, I brought a flip chart, but we didn't use it.
Yeah.
But I can do that too. Dave?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Flex Day is off the schedule. At least I'm considering that from calendar committee, from what I'm hearing. What about classified days? That could free up some money too, can it?
Well, not only would it free up money, but it would free up staff in order to do work. And that's a good idea. And who would we? Well, Gary's sitting right beside you.
Mm-hmm. I can look into that.
Okay.
I have to talk to Dan and.
Was it classified days though been funded by staff development?
Correct. It was going to be funded by staff development. I think it's like.
Okay, but staff development's 01, right?
Right, but there isn't a separate line item for classified day. It's just somebody says
not.
just.
Okay, but nonetheless, the money would be spent.
But something else.
So could between now and whenever our next time would be, I like the idea of the 410, looking at closing on Fridays. Could some numbers be put together with respect to what those savings might be? And then if we close spring, what those savings, I mean,
Closing spring, I said, is about $25,000.
I think about the only thing that we could do right now would be the spring break week. But other than the Fridays, the schedule's already set, classes have already started, so.
You're talking about during the summer.
Well, but that's 12-13. That's not the 2.85.
That's true.
But definitely in the summer we could look at some things.
Yeah, and it wasn't just this particular time; it's the go forward, and
right.
And particularly if the concept of okay, so what about the calculations with respect to spring and winter sessions? If we're looking at those issues.
Well, let me ask, because I don't have a clue, and I have been asked. If we had 3 starts instead of 4, does that save money? If we had 3 semesters instead of 4 semesters, are there funds to be saved in terms of, for instance, student services? Mm-hmm. Do you know, Bob?
Student services, it would be smoother, yet potentially, because you only have 3 starts up as opposed to 4 with respect to gearing up and processing and everything you have to do, notification of students. So there are probably some savings there. Just hang on. Yeah, this on. Yeah, so there'll probably be some savings there. I wouldn't know how much, and they probably.
Is there a way of quantifying that?
Could definitely look into it. Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts?
You mentioned that we could save maybe $750,000 from the LED lights. We still have a third of this year left, so that's about $250,000 there.
Yeah, and part of what we intended to do was to hire custodians using that money, so that we didn't dip into the $1 million. So it'll end up being one or the other. Although we weren't going to use it all for custodians either. But
are you going to transfer that money out of your? Isn't that coming out of a special fund though?
No, the savings would come into the 01 utility fund.
Okay.
And then what you do is just move over a certain portion of that for custodians. And the hope is that we would be able to afford to hire 10 custodians, and then it would, still leave hundreds of thousands of dollars left over. But, no, Danny's correct. We're trying to track passing water and power bills, and they always lag a little behind to see what the actual impact is. And if you've noticed, and Dave and I were just talking, I think this morning, the V building outside used to have 3 tube lights. They were each combined 100 watts maybe? Were they 32s each? Okay, and now we're going down to 15 watts, so that's an 85% savings in lights. We've done the same thing down the C building corridor. There's 85% savings, plus we're turning the lights off at night. So that's about a 90% savings. So wherever we can, and we're optimizing anywhere that we can and reducing lighting levels where it's not critical. It's not in a classroom, it's down a corridor. And otherwise, it's just money down a rat hole. So we're trying to even gain efficiency past what we promised.
So rat hole, so that's where the secret fund is in the rat hole.
That's a rat hole.
I get it, yeah.
About 120, I think.
So maybe at the next meeting, Anthony, would you have the a number tied to the vacancies?
Yeah, I can get that up.
And vacancies plus the portion of the $1 million, pardon?
Yeah, plus that 19 million you said that was for.
Plus the 19 million.
Yeah, so the 19 million, the vacancies, and then the money of the million that wasn't filled yet.
Yeah.
Right.
So the 3 things.
Right.
Is the tuition still going up to $46
Yes.
a unit?
Yes.
Are they figuring that in as, even with that, is still going to be that much?
Yes. That's, the key part is, and for all the energy that we saw the other day at the board meeting, the fact is all that energy needs to go up Sacramento. Because, at some moment we need to get off of the roller coaster from Sacramento. Because, you can't just keep going through the budget, the times of plenty and the famines. Yeah.
Well, we're talking with the people up there in Sacramento. They said that's fine and dandy. We can give you more money. Who are we going to take it from?
No, I know that.
So.
And it comes down to priorities. I know that too. But the fact is that we know that there's fat in our system still, and we need to go after that. But the truth is that there's fat in a lot of governmental agencies too. And then it comes down to what's more important. Is it more important to spend money on prison guards, or is it more important to spend money on faculty? I mean, you do have to make tough choices.
I've had faculty there like prison guards, though.
Okay, is there anything else? It's now 3 o'clock, and I hate ending meetings overtime. Anything else? Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. Any objection? All right, we're adjourned. It's 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.